Like here's a news flash for Thomas Harris. Hannibal Lecter is a fictional character. He's not gonna suck your dick.
You've seen these tapes before, haven't you, Henrik?
I confess absolutely nothing.
I confess I've seen one of these before. That makes me a son of a bitch. Tonight.
That makes you a complete son of a bitch. And a monster on top of that. It's now just you and me, Sport.
And you, dear listener, if you're still there. Henrik, these movies make me oddly hungry. All this talk about body parts used in food. Like, well, obviously I would use different animals for the occasion, but otherwise...
What? You're trying to say that you don't eat pork? Is that it?
Oh, I do. Maybe, like, human brain cells would be kind of a new exciting feature, which I'm not ready to delve into just yet.
Well, you know what they say about the true culinarist. It's always open for new and different things.
Mm-hmm. Open and brains open and...
To take your notion on, or the joke about feeling yourself hungry...
Not even a joke.
Watching these films. Well, not even a joke necessary. But you are not completely alone with that sentiment, seeing how the TV series, which we are not covering today, but the TV series Hannibal, which took the exact same kind of visual route, where they also heavily emphasize the food and the cooking aspect of Hannibal's crimes, and well, the kind of a high life, high cuisine aspect of Hannibal stories altogether.
Delicious, Henrik. We have a few movies on the menu tonight. Manhunter, The Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal, Red Dragon, and the rather infamous Hannibal Rising.
Yeah, which was a late addition to the watch list, because when we originally talked about this, and I pitched this project as something that we could do, I have to confess, I absolutely completely forgot that Hannibal Rising is a movie that exists. I remember it like 5 days after the pitch, and I was like, oh yeah, that is also a thing, and then I decided that I will just not bring it up in any form and mention, and see if we can just, if I can just slip past today's recording without ever actually having to acknowledge that I had forgotten Hannibal Rising. I don't know to our listeners benefit or not, but well, you then remember that also is a movie in this very canon.
Yeah, like, you can't put this through my filter here, Henrik. Like, if one of us is completionist, it's definitely me, not you. So I see a movie on the list and I'm like, ugh, we have to go through this.
No, but you can't blame me for trying.
You know what I'm gonna try here, Henrik? I would start this exploration with, honestly, just a comparison of Manhunter and Red Dragon. They kinda go together nicely.
Yes and no. I can see your point. I can see like the argument why they would go nicely together, coming from the same source material, but having a little twist in the way how they approach the original book Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. So yeah, we can do that, but I'm not 100% that they work together side by side. There is a notable difference in how Red Dragon the movie approaches Red Dragon the book. I'm placing heavy blame on those stylistic and tone differences on the later movies in this franchise, especially Ridley Scott's Hannibal. My case will be that the Red Dragon remake took quite a lot of inspiration from Ridley Scott.
I basically got a whole week to go through the books, but do you think I would actually go through all of the, 4 books for this episode? No, I was unable to do that. But hey, I was able to go a little bit deeper into the movies though. Manhunter. I watched the director's cut version, just to see if you are on the same page with that.
Mm-hmm.
Might be a little bit hard to come across the not director's cut version, in fact.
At these days, yeah. I do have some really old Finnish DVD release. I have a recollection that would not be a director's cut version. But anyways, the theatrical cut has become somewhat of an obscurity and a rare cinema find.
I've seen The Silence of the Lambs a couple of times before delving into this episode. I don't recall that I've seen the sequels in full ever before this session, without giving any spoilers about my opinions on this masterwork that we're gonna get into, Lambs. But how about you?
I'm perhaps a bit more on my home turf when it comes to the whole Hannibal, whatever this is supposed to, cinematic universe, the Hannibal canon. Like I would think with everybody else, my first introduction to Hannibal Lecter fiction was also the movie version of Silence of the Lambs. And I read the books pretty quickly after seeing the Silence for the first time. I saw Silence somewhere around, would have been 99, 2000s, around the block when Thomas Harris was writing Hannibal. I read the first two books, then Hannibal came out, and it was easy for me to jump right into that book, and well, the film adaptation followed pretty soon afterwards. So I managed to have this kind of a good binge of consuming different Hannibal stories. And then, of course, years later came Hannibal Rising. I wasn't super interested in Rising when it came out. I was always aware that the film and the book exist, but it was once again one of those cases where it had been out on DVD something like 3 years before I actually watched it for the first time and also read the novel.
We're dealing with Manhunter, the first adaptation of the Red Dragon, the book. Then we have the actual Red Dragon, the actual Anthony Hopkins series of films. The first one made in 1986, Manhunter, directed by Michael Mann, known for example, The Insider and Collateral.
Yeah, Heat being perhaps the most well-known work from Mann. Here, very much being the early years of Michael's career, which does show up in different ways. We have some of the staple elements of Michael Mann's filmography here, elements that would later more heavily and with more nuance be used in Collateral and Heat. But we have like the early start with some rough edges in Manhunter.
Whereas Red Dragon, directed by Brett Ratner, he has directed Rush Hour 1998 and has directed something in the X-Men saga.
Part 3, if I remember correctly.
The Last Stand.
Yeah. That is the infamous Part 3, which, well, the first X-Men movie to actually sink the X-Men film franchise for a few good years.
And we have quite the lineup in the Red Dragon, at least retrospectively. Well, Edward Norton, Ray Fiennes. Well, we do have Philip Seymour Hoffman a little bit here and there. Emily Watson.
Harvey Keitel.
Yeah.
Obviously, Anthony Hopkins. All well-known actors by the time this movie came out, but not everyone had yet reached their career peaks. Fiennes being the most obvious here, had already done Schindler's List and was well known from that one, but this was before he became Voldemort.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a background on why this movie was called Manhunter instead of Red Dragon. It was something that the producer Dino De Laurenti insisted. He insisted on renaming it to avoid confusion with Year of the Dragon, which was a flopped martial arts movie. I guess understandable.
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. There are a couple of stories floating around why the name change was insisted. Year of the Dragon, which was a flop. Year of the Dragon cop drama taking place. What was it in Chinatown now? Mickey Rourke going against the Japanese mafia or Yakuza or whatever it was that he was chasing. Not necessarily the best cop thriller we have, and for Michael Cimino's flop era of his career. So that obviously can be one source, and like you mentioned, the possibility that the movie would be, if they titled Red Dragon, would be confused with some martial arts films. Yeah, that's one version also. Might be that why De Laurentiis insisted that the name had to be changed to Red Dragon. Then again, at the same time, I do actually have always been of the opinion that this was somewhat dumbfoundingly stupid decision to make. Like, you buy the rights to a mega hit book, Thomas Harris's Red Dragon, and you make a film adaptation of the book Red Dragon, and then you make damn certain that your movie is not called the same name that the mega hit book has. So you basically made a licensed film, and you made certain that, you know, the audiences won't draw the conclusion into the famous thing that filming rights you have just bought. It's kind of like following Lord of the Rings, the Chronicles of Narnia movies would have been like some knights and sorcery shit or something like that. And what not actually leaned back into the intellectual property which film rights they would have just bought.
Well, you know, for better or worse, Americans seem to really think that their audiences are not that smart on more than one occasion. The good and the bad. Let's grab onto something here. I preferred Manhunter in some ways more than Red Dragon. Manhunter, it spends a lot of time with the emotions of the characters and the establishing of locations. Manhunter has a bit of the over-the-top lighting, most notably at the Graham household. That blue light that's there in such a degree that it would make even Teen Candy blush. But the camera and the dialogue that we see, yeah, I enjoy that it's slower paced, and it also takes more time to establish a way fuller relationship between the Dollarhide and Reba. I appreciate how Michael Mann also doesn't shove everything on the audience's faces here. There are some dialogue pieces here which have less emphasis on them than in Red Dragon, which leaves it more for the audience to figure out some pieces. Like in Red Dragon's case, there's often an entire scene made to highlight one key piece of dialogue so that the audience will not sleep on it. Highlight this dialogue, highlight this moment. Manhunter has a little bit less hand-holding.
Yeah, there is a strong tonal shift that happens between the two versions of the same book. Manhunter, in my opinion, it's from the two adaptations, it's the one that more has the feeling of the titular manhunt. It's more of a chase where you have a hunter chasing his prey. To name some of our past episodes, I've always felt that Manhunter is kind of a similar type of story that, for example, Clint Eastwood's White Hunter Black Heart, which also dealt with this idea of an obsession. There it was a director who has the obsession to shoot an elephant.
Yeah. And
in here we are dealing with similar type of obsessive behavior from Graham's part to catch a Dollarhide. And in Manhunter, the feeling is more that for the large part of the movie, now talking with the director's cut that has the Graham meets the family, but outside of that one scene, had that been removed, the feeling you got from Graham for large chunks of the story is that he's not necessarily even that interested in saving lives or saving families. He's more interested in simply the act of, chasing his prey and catching Dollarhide. as a hunter. Contrast to that, 2002's Red Dragon, it's more your typical posh late 90s, early 2000s serial killer film that more heavily emphasizes, well, that the violence of the acts and the blood and gore, and most definitely extremely heavily emphasizes Anthony Hopkins' Hannibal Lecter, which I do kind of feel that is perhaps the main reason for the kind of constructural differences between Red Dragon and Manhunter. And Red Dragon the film and Red Dragon the book. In the book, and also in Michael Mann's Manhunter, it's very procedural story, and heavy emphasis is put on the investigative elements and kind of the institution, FBI, that is chasing after Dollar Hyde. And a lot of kind of how these different specialists of different fields come together to build up Dollar Hyde's profile and to find these different aspects, how they are going to catch him. Those are being brought more into light in the book and in Manhunter. Versus 2002 film adaptation Red Dragon, the investigation is kind of just Graham and Lecter, who now has way more scenes in the story. With those more added scenes also comes the tone that, well, it's not even so much Graham's investigation as it's Lecter's investigation. A lot of 2002 Red Dragon's approach is that Graham visits Lecter in the sanatorium, and Lecter then feeds the next plot point to Graham, the next clue. It's almost like Lecter would have the script in his jail cell. Like, that's his magic ability. He's the guy in the film who has read the script.
Yeah.
From my opinion, it's actually a bit downside for 2002's Red Dragon, where basically Graham and the whole institution of FBI is made to look, well, to say it bluntly, imbecilic when contrasted against Lecter, who hands over all the major clues. And I can understand this, seeing how, well, following Silence of the Lambs, basically the whole world's perspective on Hannibal Lecter seemed to change. There started to be the Lecter mania and some type of a parasocial love relationship that we all seemed to have with a fictional character, which also, when I said that, I can see a cause and effect starting from Silence of the Lambs, but most definitely from Ridley Scott's Hannibal to Red Dragon in the way how Hannibal Lecter is being approached and used in these stories. This is now what we are seeing in 2002 Red Dragon. This kind of a love relationship that we all developed with Hannibal Lecter and the idea of Hannibal Lecter. And therefore, the 2002 movie has to have more Hannibal Lecter. And because he's meant to be a super genius intellectual shrink, it also means that, he has to be able to use those abilities. And since everybody loved when he was helping Clarice Starling in Silence of the Lambs, now he's helping Will Graham. And it's basically just like that would be the reasoning. That would be the cause which leads into, well, Anthony Hopkins basically just telling Will Graham how to solve the case.
Yeah, there's a clear effect on Hopkins' influence on the series here. Michael Mann, though, he approaches the source material as a sort of like a thriller. I don't know how much of a Hitchcockian, but it's more simple in some ways. It uses a lot of those shadows and color coding, but I thought that Red Dragon was cinematographically a little bit more dull. Sure, it has more color and more contrast in its shots, but at the same time I think it looks more like some kind of a CSI episode. I appreciate Manhunter artistically in that sense more. Red Dragon, it sure looks more expensive, and I think it's technically more apt overall, but I find it a little bit more one-dimensional and dull in its palette and the camera use.
Well, I'm on the same boat. I do like Manhunter more, but I'm more hesitant in saying that Red Dragon is dull, or there would be an inherent flaw in the way how Red Dragon was shot. To me, it's more of a case of aesthetics. I'm one of those who has a strong soft spot for the 80s and early 90s, kind of a neon glow aesthetic.
Yep.
That was heavily used in media at that time, and which has always been kind of like Michael Mann's the hammer in Michael Mann's toolbox, so to say. Used the same aesthetic in Heat, to a lesser effect also in one of his first films, Thief, was used in Collateral. So basically, the aesthetic is something that Michael Mann typically uses in everything he does. Not counting in Public Enemies with Johnny Depp, which was perhaps even today would it be like the only non-neon glow film from Michael Mann? And as a fan of the aesthetic, I also lean more heavily in the Manhunter's direction than to Red Dragon's. Then again, when it comes to like evaluating Red Dragon and Red Dragon's color palette and cinematography in the terms of early 2000s Bosch serial killer films, in that sense, I would say that, well, Red Dragon does pretty admirable job. Like, it looks just as fancy and fine as, well, basically any run-of-the-mill early 2000s Bosch serial killer movie. It doesn't have the cinematic edge of some of the like the heavyweights, the masterpieces of that era. Like, if you would take Red Dragon and contrast it against something like David Fincher's Seven would just blow Red Dragon out of the water immediately.
Yep.
But if you contrast Red Dragon against some of the, like, following Seven, we had this whole lieu of serial killer fiction. We couldn't go through a month without at least 5 serial killer movies coming out. So if you take those, like the 7 wannabes, and contrast Red Dragon against them, well, basically Red Dragon is just as much on par as any other 7 wannabe. So yeah, it's. I don't say it's dull. I don't say it's bad. I don't say that Red Dragon has an inherent flaw, but it doesn't have anything special going on.
Yeah.
The images are flashy and nice all the time, but well, so it was in all of those other 1,500 serial killer thriller films.
That's the thing. I think there's a considerable oversaturation of serial killer or detective stories in the early 2000s, and we have Red Dragon here. I'm not saying that the movie really looks dull. It just maybe looks duller than Manhunter, but it's very apt filmmaking. I'm not blaming that. I would just say that it's a little bit more on the nose, to the point, and every scene is super calculated compared to Manhunter. Of course, this might come with the huge caveat of the primacy effect. You see Manhunter first, then you go to Red Dragon, and then you're just comparing everything scene by scene. That's normal. I watched these movies in order, as one does, and then Red Dragon just feels a little bit like repetition, and I quite preferred William Peterson in the role compared to Edward Norton. It's just in the same way, he doesn't just work for me as a convincing detective.
Yeah. To start off with the cinematography and direction, I'm on the same boat, but at the same time, once again, basically, the situation is not. It's not even between Ratner and Michael Mann. Like with Mann, two things that perhaps have to be taken into account. Manhunter was made in the 80s, so now that we watch it in 2025, we are looking something like over 40-year-old film. So basically the aesthetic that could have been every day in 86 when Manhunter was made can now, for us to be, it can have an exotic feel. It can feel like, oh, we haven't seen this type of cinematography and this type of lighting and kind of a naturalistic on the street camera work in cinema for quite some time. Whereas, the technology, extremely calculated, extremely technically well-made shot composition stuff that you have in Red Dragon, that is basically what now is saturated by the cinema screens. Can partly be that. And of course, there is also the difference between directors. Manhunter comes from still kind of finding his groove Michael Mann, which can also lead into the film having rougher edges in its direction, its cinematography, which well, if it works for you, can be like this extra something that you just appreciate and enjoy. Whereas Red Dragon, it comes from a director who kind of grew up in the, a nice looking, really well calculated Hollywood directional machine. Having made Rush Hour and having made Rush Hour 2 before Red Dragon, having made Family Man, which is kind of extremely traditional romantic comedy. So basically Ratner is Michael Mann is still gathering his toolkit. Ratner, on the other hand, is directing with the toolkit that he has already inherited from Hollywood. So in that sense, it's kind of like it's hard to fault Ratner for Red Dragon looking like it looks, even if you are not fully on board with the way how the film looks. Like you can say that it's too calculated to your taste, but at the same time it comes from a director who has been taught by the Hollywood to, make extremely calculated films. Contrast that to Manhunter, where the director is still kind of learning, like, what even is his whole groove.
Manhunter wasn't a particularly successful film, to my understanding.
And no, it flopped. It flopped heavily, to a point where Dino De Laurentiis even completely lost interest in Thomas Harris's books.
Yeah, I can understand. Perhaps difficult to pinpoint why that happens unless you have more details on that. Was the Manhunter title now the problem, or people just didn't find it very appealing, or there was too much competition, or...
It's never been fully explained, like, why Manhunter originally flopped. The title question is usually that the first culprit that people look for and point their fingers at. Was it just, poor title decision from Laurentiis? I don't know. Could just be that it was just bad timing. Manhunter would have come out in that 1 month when nobody was actually interested in serial killer films. Might also be the fact that, well, Manhunter at that point, like, certainly, yeah, Red Dragon was a hugely successful book, but that's basically all it was. Like, in 86, Red Dragon was just one book from this author that hadn't really written, well, did he have like one book under his belt before writing Red Dragon? So it wasn't like a Stephen King kind of situation where you have a super prophilic author writing his next novel, which is turned into film, automatically brings in huge crowds. And especially the Hannibal Lecter phenomena hadn't yet started. So there really was not this, in my opinion, when Manhunter came out, there was not this kind of a driving feature, something that would start the hype and bring the audiences into cinema theaters. at the time. Like, Manhunter is just a movie that has to compete on the market with just by being itself, just being a serial killer thriller film, and based on extremely well-known and successful book, which you then sabotage by, changing the name. So in that sense, I would say that perhaps is just bad timing.
Bad timing, or, well, it's not that Manhunter is without its flaws.
Yeah, but Manhunter does have its problems, but at the same time, it also wasn't hugely hated by the critics.
But maybe not hugely loved either.
Yeah. The original reviews that the film got, they were kind of mixed. The critics felt that it was too stylish, and they just didn't vibe with Michael Mann's whole visual style, pastel colors and Art Deco architecture, etc. Also the fact that, staying true to Michael Mann's style, it's also like Manhunter cinematography-wise is quite a lot of rooms with white walls and nothing on them. It's people in white rooms, the movie, which, you may appreciate if that is part of the aesthetic that appeals to you, but it wasn't part of the aesthetic that necessarily appealed to the critics in 86. It's one of those films that kind of rose from well, not necessarily from a cult status, but did get a second win, being the early Michael Mann movie that everybody missed when it came out. It later on it got this legacy, which I would say helped Manhunter's legacy a hell of a lot.
But both movies do have a guy with pantyhose on his head. That's something. But there is problems.
And the pantyhose gets more backstory in Red Dragon.
Well, pantyhose might get more backstory in Red Dragon, but everything outside of pantyhose gets more attention in Manhunter, when it vis-a-vis the villain, at least, and especially the villain and the blind lady. I thought that was really key why I liked Manhunter way much. Whereas in Red Dragon, the whole relationship it doesn't really get to build even, and for better or worse, it's just in the middle of it, it's also made as if there are cracks in the relationship already.
That's interesting, because to me, actually, I felt that when it comes to the relationship, that actually is something that Red Dragon did better than Manhunter. To me, in Manhunter, the relationship kind of just goes, I show up at your work once, and then they have the kissing, and okay, I guess we are in love now. So that the build-up to basically what happens, in my opinion, is better in Red Dragon. Dollarhide, Ralph Fiennes puts a hell of a lot more emotion into the moment when the relationship ends in Red Dragon than what Noonan puts in Manhunter. Granted, completely different type of situations, but anyways, the emotional aspect that on the other hand gets more ground in Manhunter, I felt was Graham's family. So that's kind of the trade-off between the two movies that I felt. Dollarhide's relationship, in my opinion, is better handled in Red Dragon. Then again, Manhunter has more of Graham's family. So it's kind of like, for me, it was kind of like pick your poison situation.
I felt that Lady Graham was a little bit more understanding towards Mr. Graham in Manhunter. There was a more nuance to, their relationship, and there was just more time given for their relationship period in Manhunter, yeah. At least if you are watching the director's cut, yeah. But I think still even there's more material in Manhunter between them.
You mean between Dorhan and Riba, or between Graham and his family, like which relationship.
Totally talking about Graham family here first now.
Yeah. Graham family most definitely has like the screen time is amped in Manhunter.
Yeah.
Or Manhunter uses pretty much all the things from the book of Graham and his family, whereas in Red Dragon they are mostly forgotten. They show up in the beginning and then they pretty much just show up in the climax, and that's the family stuff you got, not counting in like one scene in the middle.
Curiously, neither movie really utilizes possible real tension between the Grahams. Like, Manhunter does a little bit there at the beach, but other than that, Red Dragon, I don't recall any. There's no major conflict between the characters, which you would expect especially when Mr. Graham is walking away from the institution, running away from the institution in Manhunter. It's played down considerably in Red Dragon, I thought. But yeah, actually that's running out of the whole institution felt a little bit ridiculous to me. But there is that scene, and then there's that reporter who takes the picture, and it's all over pages in newspaper. And you would think that would be the moment when the Lady Graham is like, "You son of a bitch, what did you do? Why did you get so deeply involved when you said you're not gonna get deeply involved?" But there's never that moment.
Yeah. If memory serves me correctly, there also is never that moment in the book, which might explain something. When it comes to the tension in Graham's family relationship, I never felt that Graham's wife necessarily is more understanding towards Will's participation in the investigation in Manhunter than in Red Dragon. I always felt that she was pretty understanding in both movies, but what most definitely does happen in Manhunter is that the strain that the relationship faces is put more emphasis on, because it's a big part in the book, or not a big part, but towards the end it becomes actually a major factor that Will's wife does not actually accept Will's participation in the Dollarhide investigation. She accepts it in the sense that she understands why Will feels compelled to chase after Dollarhide, and she understands kind of the societal good that Will's participation has. Like, Dollarhide is a monster, she understands that, and monster has to be stopped. Will is perhaps the best capable chaser that the FBI has, so, that is something that she understands and accepts. But at the same time, she does not really accept the emotional toll that the investigation has on the own home front, so to say.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the end of the book, this is something where both movies differ from the source material noticeably. The book never actually states this at the final pages, but it's heavily implied that the end of all of this, Will's wife ends up leaving Will at some point in the future. When the final pages turn up, they are still together, but the relationship has taken so much abuse in course of the investigation that it's. I always read the final pages and came home with the sense that they will break up, and also Will's relationship to his surrogate son is something that pretty much is done by the end of the book. So at the very final page, what you have is a broken man with a broken family at the very end of it. And that's kind of the cost that Will have to pay for his participation and for stopping Dollarhide in the book. And whereas both movies end with this notion, especially the director's cut of Manhunter, Red Dragon and director's cut of Manhunter end with the notion that the family very much stays intact, and the relationship can actually withstand the stress that the investigation has put on it. The theatrical cut is somewhat different here. Director's cut of Manhunter ends with Will and his family on the beach. The theatrical cut is Will or standing on the end of a pier and his friend, most likely Crawford, joining him on the pier. So there is a possibility of taking the reading in the theatrical cut of Manhunter that the Grahams will divorce at some point, if they haven't already.
That's interesting. Since you have read the books, in the book, is there the dramatic showdown where Dollarhide comes to Graham family's house, like in Red Dragon, or not?
Yeah. Yes and no. Yes and no. There is a dramatic... Well, it's not a dramatic showdown. It's only like... In the book, at the very end, Dollarhide shows up in Graham's home. That much is true. Is it dramatic showdown? No, it's over in something like in 2 pages. Total. And it most definitely is. It's not as heroic, and it's not as kinda happy like it is in 2002's film adaptation. The way how it goes in the book, Dollarhide, Graham in his and his family, they are at the beach, and the tensions between Graham and his adopted son, they have risen up. The son is thinking more about his grandfather and his father than Will, and Will feels that he's being blamed for something. He's being blamed for the tensions at home. And he's kind of fed up with the whole situation. Turns around and starts to leave, and all of a sudden notices Dollarhide there on the beach. Dollarhide then proceeds to stab Will in the face pretty badly, which causes Will to go into shock, and in the panic he starts to run into the direction A, kind of abandoning his wife and child on that moment. And wife and child, they also notice Dollarhide, and they start panically running towards the house. And Dollarhide chooses to chase after wife and son, but wife and son, being some type of something of on Usain Bolt strain there, manages to make the fast sprint to the bedroom, where the wife immediately goes for Will's gun, which has been hidden in the wardrobe, takes it out. Dollarhide breaks the door down, the bedroom door down, and the wife just shoots him in the face, killing him. That's how it goes in the book. In the film, we have perhaps a better way to end it if you want to have a heroic ending for your story. Like in the movie, we have that whole thing where Dollarhide takes the son as a hostage, and in that moment, Will realizes, he remembers some of the abusive things that Dollarhide's grandmother had said to him when he was a child. And then Will proceeds to abuse those traumatic triggers to trigger Dollarhide, which in that moment almost takes like a protective stance of the kid that he's being using as a hostage. Which I always felt that was a smart move from Will's end, and also a clever twist when it comes to Dollarhide. I appreciated that. When it comes to the different endings, though, I always felt that in some way, even though it is largely anticlimactic and it's a really downer of an ending, the book, I have quite liked the way the book ends, because there is kind of this, like, at the end of it all, there are no heroes feel to it.
Interesting. I thought it was also interesting how Manhunter, of course, has the whole call that Hannibal makes where he gets the home address, but then fuck all is done with the home address in that movie, in the sense of a confrontation at the end anyways.
Yeah. Like in Manhunter, it does cause the effect that the FBI has to relocate the family to another house to keep them safe.
There's that, and of course there's always the shadow hanging around the movie. Like, you don't really know if he's gonna make the attack or there's gonna be some other consequence from that leakage. The leakage, which is, I think, as a plot point, kind of ridiculously made. The whole phone call.
I don't know. I myself, I've never had a problem with the phone call, nor Hannibal contacted Dollarhide through National Chatteler. If something like that, basically, I would say, and now I'm purely theorizing here, that may be the aspect of Hannibal Lecter that originally kind of appealed to Thomas Harris and may have been like the cleverness that he has when he makes the phone call to dig out Graham's home address, the kind of psychological manipulation that he utilizes in that moment may have been the things that caused Thomas Harris himself eventually, in my opinion, kind of fall in love with his own character. And maybe the original source or the original reason why, in the course of Hannibal canon and the later books, why Hannibal Lecter starts to transform into basically the serial killer that he eventually becomes in course of these stories, because it's noticeable thing in both film adaptations and the book that not much information actually is given about Hannibal Lecter. He's not even a cannibal in the original, like the first book, Red Dragon, if memory serves me correctly. He was a professor who killed, was it 5 college students? And then there was hinted that he would have had like a 6th victim who actually survived his attack in the novel Red Dragon. And this 6th victim later on in Hannibal would become Mason Murger. But that, to my recollection, was the extent that Hannibal's past was actually opened originally. There is the notion that they try to psychoanalyze Hannibal Lecter, and Graham makes the point that it has been a fool's errand in previously, that Hannibal has expressed psychological tendencies, and he has hints of this mental illness, and he has traits of this mental illness, and later on he comes into the conclusion that the only medical term that they can kind of apply to Hannibal Lecter is that he's just a monster. But that was about it, about Hannibal in Red Dragon. So when it comes to Hannibal Lecter, he's someone whose character very much is built in the following stories.
Now that we're here, might as well discuss a little bit more in detail what we think about the Manhunter's made-up ending, which has nothing to do with the book. Manufactured ending, I would say a bit on the cliché side, but then again, perhaps the cliché nature or just the fact that things go haywire so quickly with the character's behavior or control of his situation is interesting and emphasizes the structure of Manhunter as a story of a guy who is sort of supposed to be this. I don't know if Dollarhide is necessarily supposed to be a mastermind, but he has the situation very firmly under control. He's doing his murdering business, but then he starts to dramatically slip after the, what I consider, better utilized, built-up relationship between Dollarhide and Reba. I think there's more dialogue between them, more moments between them, more intimate moments between them even. There's a scene in the pier when they're together and hugging, and before that there's these facial expressions on the bed that kind of solidify how much everything means to him, and I just feel that it struck me completely differently than in Red Dragon, which kind of hurries it up a bit in comparison, and maybe brings it a little bit too much to your face. Like in Red Dragon, the, I would say, infamous kitchen scene, sharing disabilities. Like, yes, I know how you feel because I have this little disability as well. So aren't we a great couple? It just comes a little bit that fast.
Yeah, I also felt that when it comes to Dollarhide and Reba, Manhunter is the movie that kind of hurries that relationship more.
Okay.
And Red Dragon is the one that kind of takes more of its time with the relationship. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the in-your-face nature of it all, that's something where I do wholeheartedly agree with you. Like to give an example of this. If we look at Dollarhide, which I don't think that either actor, Noonan nor Fiennes, makes a bad job as a Dollarhide, but with Noonan, when it comes to Dollarhide and his internal turmoils, Noonan plays him very low key, and
I would say over the top.
Over the top, how?
Well, he does come off to me as an archetype villain-looking person. I don't know why a 34-year-old character, by the way, is portrayed as looking 64 here, but whatevs. But he okay. Is menacing in a way that it's quite straightforward archetype villainish behavior to me, except the unexpected moment when he falls in love and then crushes and burns that. And what I wanted to say about everything following that is obviously when he starts to make haphazard decisions and everything falls apart in his plans. Yeah.
Okay, because I, on the other hand, I felt that not necessarily to use the word realistic, but with Noonan it was more kind of a things that you didn't see. It was kind of a more just like something bubbling under the surface. Like Noonan now is stone-faced basically always, and uses as a little body movement as possible. For example, when he is in contact with Reba, and then you have that one moment when after they have had sex, when Dollarhide is lying awake in the bed, and he puts Reba's hand over his mouth and is almost like suffocating a scream in that moment. And that is kind of like the most expressive that we have from Noonan. Whereas with Fiennes is more expressive when it comes to what Dollarhide is feeling. He expresses more emotions with his face, and also we have just more dialogue that directly states what Dollarhide is feeling in any current scene. When the climax happens at Dollarhide's house, Noonan is just quiet and just drags Reba to kitchen and plans to stab her. Fiennes, on the other hand, is teary-eyed and yelling how he believed that he could believe in trust Reba, and now Reba has betrayed that trust and is waving the shotgun. So to me, that's the difference between the two portrayals, and I don't say that either one is wrong, and I'm not saying that A is better than B here. But it's kind of once again, it's kind of like pick your poison. Do you want the version where Dollarhide says to you what he's feeling, or do you want the version where he's just closed-lipped and doesn't actually say anything at all?
Yeah, I got the feeling I felt that the Manhunter's interpretation of the scene where Dollarhide is watching over when Reba is with the friend from work at the porch, and he misinterprets the whole moment. I thought that was cut really, really well, and I thought that it was just much better execution than in Red Dragon. But I guess, it comes down to preferences more than anything. But do you think now, retrospectively, that it was worthwhile to make another version of Red Dragon as Red Dragon? Do you think it contributed something that... Do you think it was worth the effort?
Yeah. I do think it was worth the effort in the sense that we didn't get a bad movie out of it. Was it absolutely necessary? Did we really need a remake a remake? Well, not necessarily, no. Like, if it would have just been, or if the cinematic canon would have stayed as Manhunter, Silence of the Lambs, and Hannibal Rising, I do think that it would have been well enough. But I also don't feel that Red Dragon is somehow unnecessary or undeserving film. If something, it grants the audiences the chance to choose the interpretation that is more kind of their cup of tea. If you don't really want to see at times bland and at times extremely plain 80s cinematography, if you're more like, I enjoy more of this, Bosch 2000s cinematography, well, in that case, you can now pick Red Dragon, or if you want something that has more rougher edges, well, then you can go with Manhunter. So at least now you have the opportunity to choose. But both of them have their strengths, both of them have their weaknesses.
Yeah.
So you can also take both and just put them in Blender. Like, you can open one in VLC and the second in Windows Movie Player and have them, play side by side, and perhaps try to have your own piecemeal, put it together, perfect adaptation of the book.
In one sense, Red Dragon, it's funny that they are releasing it right now when they are. I guess they thought that, I don't know what was the plan really after Hannibal, the movie. Well,
but the plan was that Hannibal Lecter is super liked serial killer for some goddamn reason, and Hannibal managed to make a boatload of money, and Thomas Harris hadn't written a new book, goddammit, so what on earth are we going to do?
Yeah.
Thank God nobody saw that Michael Mann film set Dino De Laurentiis and started to put the budget together.
Yeah, that explains the whole prequel aspect of this movie before prequels were a huge thing. But at least it gives an opportunity for those latecomers who didn't see Manhunter to experience Manhunter. Okay, well, next, let's just insert a silencer on the lambs. Henrik, 1991. Here we have the mega super uber hit, the most known film out of this, what became sort of a franchise, frankly. Silence of the Lambs. Alright, is it good? Is it bad? Henrik, what's your experience?
Is it really even a film that we have to talk about?
It absolutely is a film that we have to talk about.
Because Silence of the Lambs, the movie that takes Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins, both already well-known stars in their own right, and elevates them into the hot shit status. And the movie that, well, almost single-handedly starts the serial killer craze in late 90s Hollywood cinema. So it's kind of like the movie from this whole franchise that absolutely everybody knows.
Yeah. And why? Let's discuss. What's good about The Silence of the Lambs?
Well, I can throw this one to your direction, because I'm sensing that I already guess what's coming. So go ahead, Karri. What is bad at Silence of the Lambs?
No.
Let's hear all the grievances.
Well, soft landing, soft landing. The good parts.
No, just jump into the bad.
Okay, you asked for it. Here we go.
I hear all the wrong opinions that I have to somehow, combat here.
Okay, sorry, but the worst part of this movie, hands down, is the movie trying to sell you so easily the whole psychological warfare which is supposed to be going on here. Jodie Foster wanted this role so badly to play Clarice Starling. And Clarice Starling, whether it's the script, whether it's the director, whether it's Jodie Foster, I don't know really. But Starling is so affected by every single thing that Lecter utters that sadly, when you contrast it against what he's saying and what the reaction is of an FBI agent, well, trainee,
not
but
yet.
Trainee,
yeah, in training,
still
hasn't graduated. We are talking about a schoolgirl here, practically.
But she's so affected by every single delivery from Lecter's mouth. And both the script and the Foster, they try to oversell the effect, is my conclusion. It's over the top, sorry. I could buy Starling's like over the top expressions where she not an FBI trainee. Like that, the facial expressions, those would be completely understandable if her character would be something else than an FBI trainee. Maybe she would be like a random housewife next door, suddenly got forcibly moved from her kitchen to bake pies for FBI, and then maybe was needed for leading a serial killer investigation for some goddamn reason. But goddamn it, Henrik.
You're already describing like the 80s serial killer thriller film.
Am I?
Pretty much, yeah. That like this is the time period of Santa with muscles and what was other really bad Hulk Hogan movies that came out.
They've made everything, but
they most definitely made everything.
Goddamn, Henrik, the whole point of her mission. The whole point of her mission was to stay focused on the mission during her visits with Hannibal. Yeah, I get it. Trainee. But did she not get any of the psychological training before this experience? Like, that would be the only acceptable explanation for how she behaves. But sadly, that really doesn't make any sense, because she's about to graduate anyways.
Okay, so what is actually... Because I don't have a problem with Jodie Foster's performance, nor the way how Clarice Starling acts. So what exactly is your problem? What irritates you?
Well, basically what I said, and to make it explained in a different way, we have countless scenes where Jodie Foster is next to Anthony Hopkins in the cell. There is something that Anthony Hopkins says, and she is completely affected by the dialogue pieces, talking something about her past, like, tell me about yourself. Tell me the whole story, and in exchange I will give you this and this info, maybe. Those expressions that are coming from her, they just do not convince me in any way as an FBI agent or FBI trainee doing an investigation. She is affected by everything. She should be out of there immediately. She is not able to handle the situation. Clearly, she's affected by every single utterance. That's just the only way that I can really put it.
Okay. Because I always felt that Jodie Foster's portrayal is basically the Clarice Starling that most stands her ground against Hannibal Lecter.
I understand why it's done in this way. Maybe they thought that the audience is too stupid, that they can't interpret the micro expressions on her face, so she kind of overplays the whole character, in my opinion. But it's just too much. Why is an FBI trainee so uncomfortable with her past that any negative spin that Lecter puts on the past, or something that's supposed to be revelatory, she's completely caught off guard by that. Yeah. The character of Lecter is supposed to be an expert on this kind of psychological manipulation. But when you kind of put it what he's actually saying and what she's experiencing, like I wouldn't be affected by anything that he would be saying. Of course, I have different life experiences, but maybe with some kind of a similar gravita. I don't care. I'm just there to do the job. I don't care about what he's saying about my past. I remember that when I was watching this as a teenager, or like more like a kid, this affected me in more ways. Maybe it was more about the eye contact. I wasn't really so focused on the dialogue or couldn't understand much of the dialogue. But yeah, I remember being affected by the movie, mostly affected by the ending with the Buffalo Bill at the end. But it's an odd movie. The strongest antagonist also is the one who's sitting in jail for most of the running time. That's okay, but I always felt that the movie kind of finishes without a completely satisfying ending. And again, I understand why they're doing the ending. But we have endless amount of time for Hannibal's monologues. But we're gonna kick his character to the curb with a quick phone call at the end. I think that would work better if kind of a clear back-to-back sequel would have popped out, but it didn't, except like a decade later. But it's fine. It's not a big deal. It's just not very satisfying ending. It's as if we get rid of Buffalo Bill, this useless idiot basically, and then it seems like the movie is fighting against the clock to just roll the credits, just wrap it up. Like, it's over, man. And then it seems like the movie just wants it to go away. Like, yeah, it sort of works in the whole way of, quote unquote, in order to save a life, you had to release a mass murderer, so you're back into square one type of thing. But Buffalo Bill, I don't really care about Buffalo Bill. I'm here for Anthony Hopkins. But yeah, I get why they are doing it. But maybe you could have done a little bit more with your main antagonist, so to speak.
Okay, why are you here for Anthony Hopkins? Like, is that a point or coming off point that you have today because you have already seen the movie and basically because Silence had the cultural effect that it had and Hannibal Lecter became the cultural phenomena that he became, so you kind of no longer can watch Silence of the Lambs without at least partly being there for Anthony Hopkins? Or was this something that was your effect when you originally first time saw the movie?
Like the lack of appreciation for the ending or the Buffalo Bill side of things?
The feeling that you are here in Silence of the Lambs for Anthony Hopkins.
Well, yeah, because he really captures the whole attention in this movie. That's why he is definitely the strongest and most interesting character of the whole movie. So I was surprised that it's like all over after Buffalo Bill is taken out of the picture. But again, it's nuances, like whatever works for you, I guess, type of thing. Once again, I understand why they would wrap it up like that. The movie wants to do the whole, okay, we are back to square one, you saved a life, so therefore you have to now hunt this serial killer again, and he's gonna kill someone once again. So did you actually accomplish anything during this mission? I like that aspect of that. Buffalo Bill is just like a side trip for me here.
Okay, well, why is that? Like, why is Anthony Hopkins so kind of strong for you?
Well, isn't he? He's just completely magnetic throughout the movie. That's why we go to see the Silence of the Lambs, yeah, because of Anthony Hopkins.
And what was this your kind of? Do you feel, if you can kind of remember back into the days when you the first viewing that you had with Silence, was this? Do you remember? Was this your feeling already back then, or is it now that you are revisiting the movie in 2025?
Isn't it obvious that Anthony Hopkins is really the whole Hannibal phenomena.
That is obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm merely like I'm interested in your perspective and overall the perspective that people have with Silence of the Lambs. The whole Hannibal Lecter cultural phenomena overall happening in Silence of the Lambs. Seeing how, as you yourself pointed out, Hannibal Lecter is the guy who stays in lockup for almost the entire film. And Buffalo Bill is the active threat. And the one who basically, he's the serial killer in this serial killer film, and he's the one who has an active captive in his basement well. And because of that, it really interests me, like, what is the aspect? Why is the thing in Anthony Hopkins and Hannibal Lecter here in Silence of the Lambs that everybody is so drawn to? Why people, overall, why you feel that Buffalo Bill is not interesting at all, and it's just basically some type of basically a gutter trash killer in this film where you would like to see more Anthony Hopkins. What is the thing? What's the secret sauce?
One part of it is that Buffalo Bill's character sort of tries to compete against Anthony Hopkins' character. There's obviously two serial killers here kind of competing for the screen time. We're following one guy who is about to make his exit from the cell compounds to be a free man. Then we have Buffalo Bill somewhere over there with his well and his victim. So maybe it's also kind of out of balance, like, what are we to make of it? What are we to focus on as an audience? Are we to follow rather what Hannibal is doing, or are we interested in Buffalo Bill side quest, so to speak? And I gravitate obviously towards the whole Hannibal side of things. Buffalo Bill is something that we have to get out of the way, but Buffalo Bill is, some would say, he's something that Hannibal has even planned beforehand. I don't know about that theory, but could be like his ticket out of the cell that was planned like 10-15 years before, which I don't really buy. I don't think there's any particular indication into that direction, if I'm not completely out of my mind here. Two completely different dudes who necessarily don't have anything to do with each other except the background and some shared connection.
So do you feel that the movie would still work if Hannibal Lecter would be removed from the story and it would just be like Buffalo Bill, with of course the following rewrite things where they have to somehow find another way to advance the investigation other than interviewing Hannibal Lecter? But do you feel that you could still enjoy Silence of the Lambs even if it would not have a Lecter in it?
Yeah, I think, and in some perverse way, perhaps the movie would benefit from Hannibal Lecter being played by somebody else than Anthony Hopkins, because he's so good in the role, so he kind of hampers the rest of the movie by his powerful presence, not only by his powerful and award-winning performance, also the camera work and also the dialogue, and how the if we go past like Anthony Hopkins and Hannibal, this is obviously the most apt, the most adapted, the most talentedly made movie out of all of these by far. The whole construction of the characters, the introduction, the way the characters are brought on the table.
So what makes what do you feel? What makes Anthony Hopkins' performance so powerful?
He commands the scenes by just his old man wisdomy presence and the eyes that communicate to the viewer that we are actually dealing with somebody dangerous. That maniacal stare, the voice.
So are you then as a movie goer? Are you someone who gravitates heavily towards the more downplayed performances, where you don't have like extreme expressions, or you don't shout and scream, or and stuff like that? Is like the stoic face and low rhythmic voice something that kind of works better for you? Because like you mentioned, there are two serial killers, and the performances, they are two very different type of killers, and therefore the performances are two completely different. Buffalo Bill, played by Levine here, is someone who, well, he famously has that scream. She puts the lotion in the basket and the victim starts to scream, and Buffalo Bill screams, ah! And screams on top of the well. And he has very extremely expressive behavior. Like, for example, that "would you fuck me? I would fuck me. I would fuck me so hard" scene, for example. Whereas Anthony Hopkins is basically, well, not monotone, but his voice is extremely stable. It's extremely calm, it's quiet. He articulates slowly and carefully, kind of like he counts his words, and he doesn't really express that much with his face. He uses his eyes a lot. So is that kind of like, do you gravitate just more towards the Anthony Hopkinses than Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, but I think it's more about the perceived intellect of the character of Hannibal and what Anthony Hopkins obviously gives to the character in that regard. You have a guy who has a very very good way with words, and there's always something to pick apart about his dialogue, and you are always trying to kind of piece out the puzzle, like what does he mean with those quotes, or why does he choose those particular words. And I think that's just way more interesting to follow than somebody who, well, Buffalo Bill, yes, the performance, it's kind of this kind of archetypical performance in a way. Yes, it is menacing, yes, it is kind of scary, but this is some kind of approaching from his environment. It seems like some kind of a archetypical neo-Nazi freak who doesn't have really much going on between his ears. Menacing nonetheless, but yeah, I guess I gravitate towards something where you have a little bit more mystery about the character.
Okay. And once again, a question where there is no correct answer, but if you would kind of think about, like you said, Hannibal Lecter is an intelligent villain, but where do you feel that intelligence comes from, or why do you feel that he is intelligent? In dialogue, he kind of is extremely blunt in basically what he says. Like, not like vocabulary wise. He uses, like, he has a good vocabulary, and he doesn't use curse words or anything like that. But like, he also is not someone whose dialogue is full of like hidden meanings, where he talks about one thing and then means the other.
Really?
He still is kind of extremely straightforward in what he's saying and what he's asking. So how do you feel? Or if you feel that he is like extremely like, or if you feel that he is someone whose dialogue is full of double meanings, like, where does that, what do you feel? How do you feel? Where does the intelligence in Hannibal come from?
I think it comes from the way that he just controls the room and the situation. Like, not everything that comes out of his mouth is maybe particularly intelligent or intellectual or double meanings. But I think there was quite a few moments where you could interpret double meanings, or at least you might not have like a straightforward answer to why he chose exactly those words, that sentence, or that particular word somewhere. Like, you can just feel that he's drilling into your brain when he's locking eyes with somebody. So that's obviously the kind of trademarkish style of Hannibal, how he communicates with people. He's drilling into their soul and just trying to figure out all the smallest nuances and trying to guess what this guy is all about and what are their weaknesses. How can I strike this guy without exactly knowing the guy? I think that's what makes it interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Don't you think so? What about you?
I'm kind of the same mind. Yeah.
Yeah. So perhaps he's just too good for the movie, to the movie's detriment a bit, to Buffalo Bill's detriment. Although it's an interesting character in its own right, yes. And I think the film would work as kind of like a serial killer exploration, investigation story perfectly fine with a considerably reduced Hannibal character.
Okay, because I don't have that problem with Buffalo Bill as a character in the movie. Like I am the same. Like I said, I am of the same mind when it comes to analyzing Hannibal Lecter, or the personal effect that Hannibal Lecter's character has on me.
Yeah.
But I don't have the Buffalo Bill problem.
Yeah. Two completely different characters. Definitely hard to believe that they would have anything to do with each other in the real world in the past. They kind of are separate movies inside one, in a sense.
Yeah. Then again, they also didn't have anything in common in the past, if I remember correctly. Like yeah, Buffalo Bill had once killed one of Lecter's patients, but that was as far as that went. Like Lecter and Bill never actually came into contact.
Yeah, but it's definitely not all bad. Like I said, I do note that there's this whole rampant sexism going on here. Maybe a little bit on overdrive, reaching the early 90s. Was it a little bit overplayed, you thought, considering already those times, or they weren't quite out of the jungle men yet at this point at the workplace?
I actually like sexism, yeah, but I'm interested in is your notion of rampant sexism. Like, how was it rampant?
Well, it's
what do you feel? What was rampant in sexism? Obviously exists in Hannibal, in Silence of the Lambs. It's a big part of the kind of subtext of the story.
That's what I mean. Yeah, it's a big part of the subtext. It's pushing it in every way that it can, especially at the beginning, but it's all over it. And I was just thinking if it's that bit too much, or do you think that this would have been common in the workplaces in the early 90s? Yeah, I guess it's possible.
I would actually say that it can be common in workplaces even today. Like this is once again why I'm looking for, or why I'm asking you to elaborate on the rampant part. Like,
well, it's exactly just the parts that the movie already wants you to perceive as, well, rampant sexism, so that the character is established as some kind of a loner at the workplace, somebody who is already a bit under threat, not only from Lecter, but from the workplace. Everybody is out to get her, kind of thing. And I guess that's one of the big reasons why this movie was so big of an Oscar phenomenon, because a strong leading lady.
But to ask the question in a different way, is it something that somebody says, or is it a gesture? Is it something that somebody does in this film that was rampant sexism, and something that you would not see in a workplace anymore in today? Or was it just some type of a feeling that you got?
I thought it was the horny FBI agents on the running trail. I thought it was one of the agents basically trying to get into her pants. All this, some suggestive dialogue there that, oh, we have a hot lady here and be careful, blah blah blah, something to that effect, which I think is not definitely 2025 material anymore. But I'm just wondering if this would be a reality in 1991 at an American workplace, and whether the lady would not report it immediately to the superiors in a situation where she is best treated by Hannibal Lecter in the entire movie out of anyone.
Okay, because I kind of feel that I perhaps have a more cynical view of humanity, and might be that I'm just unfortunately come in contact with the less savory members of genders here, but I can actually see this happening in workplace in Finland in 2025.
Well, I don't know, maybe in Rovaniemi, but in Helsinki everyone's already so equalized.
I just don't believe that. Not the least.
Where to go from here?
Just a passing glance of somebody's ass as she or he walks right past you. I've seen, like I said, I've seen too many less savory, too much less savory behavior from both sexes that I just don't believe that we are yet past that, or having flirtatious discussion with someone, or passing I'm testing my waters remark here or there, perhaps even at the workplace. I just I don't have that strong faith in humanity, unfortunately, that I would say that we are yet over that.
Yeah, well, maybe this is what it does to you when you're living abroad for almost 10 years now, not in a row.
I'm also questioning that in Poland and Spain, and
I would say Finland is still a safe haven compared to many of the places where I've lived when it comes to all of this stuff. It looks like such of a softy country, and everything is driven to the fucking extreme already there in many aspects.
So is the workplace sexism so more rampant in elsewhere?
Yeah.
Asking as someone who only has the experience from
the main effect of reading something like the daily newspaper of Finland, Helsingin Sanomat. When you come to the website, you're already seeing a little bit like holy hell, they have it so good already there. And Finland is on the forefront, like a world leader on all of these things, equality and sorting out your trash.
Okay. Well, good news for Finland, must say.
Yeah, that's my view. Of course, a very limited view once again, but that's my experience.
But when you said to harken back into your notion of Lecter and his character, when you contrasted Lecter's behavior against the male members of the legal department here, be it the cops or other FBI trainees, you mentioned that Lecter treats Starling with more respect. How do you feel that Lecter was more respectful? In what way? He doesn't make sexual passes at Starling. That much is true, but then again, Lecter basically cherry picks every negative event from Starling's past and calls her white trash and poor and basically does everything else except just calls Starling a slut and asks her if she would like to go out with him. So, like,
yeah,
how did you feel that Lecter was more respectful?
I'm pushing it a bit. I'm giving like an extreme example here, but at least Hannibal goes into a little bit more details about her life and isn't outright grabbing her breasts or something like that. It's more about tries to figure out in detail what's going on there, and it's not all about this super surfacey stuff that it is for the other people in the agency.
So, how about to follow from that, following from rude behavior? How did you then feel about Mix, the sexually abusive prisoner at the sanitarium? Do you side with kinda? Okay, kinda extreme question, and I do apologize the bluntness of it, but do you side with Hannibal that Mix kind of deserved to die for being such of a, well, let's just say, a rude and not well-behaving animal?
Well, in a sense that this is kind of on the Buffalo Bill end of things, like anti-intellectual, creepy monsters, plain monsters, and nothing else to their character type of way. Yeah, get out of my way and just give more space for Hannibal. So maybe good going. Yeah, good move to get rid of that one.
Okay. Because the reason why this interests me so much is because the notions that you bring up are kind of typical when I felt and experienced that they are kind of typical when people talk about Silence of the Lambs, when people talk about Hannibal Lecter. Like, and to give a direct example, when you talked about Mix, who we don't know pretty much anything about, but he is the masturbating inmate, and then proceeds to throw his cheese on Starling's face, and then Buffalo Bill. With those you used you talked about monsters, and then you have Hannibal, who is kinda removed from the equation. And yeah. This is me just getting hung up on words, but it interests me because it's kind of like, it's like I mentioned, it's kind of the social effect that the pop cultural social effect that Hannibal Lecter has had basically on everybody. And I'm interested like where it stems from, because at the end of the day, like Hannibal Lecter is as much a monster than Buffalo Bill, perhaps even more monster than what Mix ever is, depending on like what would be Mix's background, what crimes have he done, why he is locked away in the sanitarium basement with Lecter. We don't know that. But so there is a possibility that Mix perhaps is not that bad. In that case, Hannibal Lecter would be the worst monster of the two. But yet, always, like Hannibal Lecter typically gets this well, not angelic halo over his head, but he's seen in more positive light. I'm really interested, like, where does that light for Hannibal come from? So, what do you feel like? Why Hannibal Lecter is not a monster here? Is it just that he is like he's cultural and he is intelligent?
Yes, it's those things and more screen time for his character, but the fact that he is able to go a little bit deeper as a character than, I would say, Buffalo Bill or the sperm wielding ones. It just makes a more, in a lack of a better word, humane experience for the audience. than any of the other ones that are just reduced to that sperm wielding level.
Okay, and like I'm not like hand on the Bible. I promise you, I'm not like this is not my attempt to try to like psychoanalyze you. I'm trying to understand like what the fuck happens in this very same franchise when we get to the next bloody book, because the same effect happens there, in my opinion.
Okay, so
like Thomas Harris himself comes into the same conclusion than you do, and I'm trying to, now that I have a chance, I try to piece together the puzzle, like what happens and why.
Okay, we probably will get more in depth to that in a second, but I will just say that whatever happens in here, I do not agree with what they do with at least Starling's character in the sequel, which doesn't make any sense in my books. Definitely not in the way that it is depicted in the film, but the psychological effect of Hannibal's character on Starling and the Harris's notion that the character basically would be in some way unnecessary and in some way, I guess, a good character. Necessary good character that brings something good, because it gets all sorts of fucked up, especially in Hannibal Rising, because prior to Hannibal Rising we have had basically a profoundly evil character who doesn't care who he's killing, and then in Hannibal Rising is trying to make some kind of a case that, in my past I just, it's kind of a Dexter situation, frankly. It's just like Dexter copy and paste. We have a character who, in his past, started killing just the bad people, but now, somehow, the Hannibal Rising, the kind of a Batman-ish savior character, becomes an evil character later. So how does that, whatever he might have done in his past, mean anything when you also contrast it with the future? I digress at this point, but yeah. Anything else you want to say about Silence of the Lambs? Is it a good or a bad film? What are the things that you like the most?
No, I think we can get those in the quickies, but to give the spoiler, I'm as vanilla as everybody else when it comes to Silence of the Lambs. My opinions will be, well, as disappointingly normal as you can guess.
Gosh. Huh.
Yeah. If you expected some type of a hot take when it comes to Silence of the Lambs from me, I'm sorry to disappoint you.
God darn it. But I was expecting this, that I'm just gonna be the one who's going to be mocking all the super hits here again. But hey, in happier news, we're moving to Hannibal, directed by the mastermind of the ages, directed by Ridley fucking Scott.
Well, he wasn't yet at this point. Like, Hannibal came out, when was it?
2001.
2001. So in Scott's filmography, this places itself in the like we are now we have left the best days of Ridley Scott, but we are not yet in the absolute slum where he would land. We are post Blade Runner, and if I remember correctly, also Gladiator. Black Hawk Down.
Gladiator was 2000, yeah?
Yeah. But we are not yet like Alien Covenant. and whatever people, I haven't seen this one myself, but whatever people are saying about Napoleon. So we are not yet there. Yeah.
Well, Hannibal, changing of director and star. So after Silence's success, we had the inevitable sequel that somehow took forever. But yeah, director Jonathan Demme refused to return.
Yeah, feeling that he could not make a sequel as good as what was Silence of the Lambs, and felt like he does not want to take that gamble.
Yeah, there was a scene involving Clarice Starling where she is drugged and joins Lecter in some sort of cannibalism, and Dem just said that it just didn't compute for me that he could do something like this. He said he can't do that.
Yeah, Lawrence, who acts as a producer here, has later on, if I remember correctly, stated that Dem also felt that he was unsure if he could make a good enough follow-up to Silence of the Lambs. So Dem would also be kind of like... I made a goal in the previous time, and I'm gonna take my winnings when I'm on top and not try to do a hat trick here.
Yeah, Foster likewise, she turned down Clarice. She was feeling that there were some quote-unquote negative attributes to the character that betrayed the character.
Yeah, with Foster it's more of a roller coaster refusal than with Dem. The typical story goes that Foster originally was really interested in making a sequel,
right,
and would repeatedly talk about it with Hopkins, who, and both of them would be waiting like, when is the next book gonna come out, when we are going to do the sequel, and they would be really excited about the sequel for X number of years. And then when the book finally comes out, Foster starts to feel that she does not wanna do the return to the film, because she feels that it's a betrayal of her character. And then later on, Foster has gone on record and more stated that, or at least, it's hard to say, like officially Foster refused to return to the role because she was making her own film at the time, and it was officially it's in timetable conflicts. And then there is like conflicting statements being made, like, was the real reason Foster's own movie, and the fact that she just couldn't fit Hannibal into her calendar, or is the real reason that she just didn't wanna do it because she felt that Clarice Starling is so mishandled in the story.
But then again, interestingly, like Ridley Scott was on the same lines and said that he couldn't swallow the bizarre ending between Lecter and Clarice and the whole lovers theme. So if he couldn't take the quantum leap, then it would have been a good environment for Jodie Foster, one would think. But no.
Now, one would think, and then one sees the end results and he's like, yeah, no.
Yeah. In the sense that we don't really get any backstory properly understanding of why Clarice would do what she does.
Yeah, I don't know,
It's pushed more by Hannibal than Starling, that's certain.
Yeah, to me, well, I don't know if this is a hot take, but I've always felt that I have harder time understanding why Hannibal does what he does in the film than to understand why Starling does what she does in the book.
Okay.
I'm on the camp. I like the book ending more than the film ending, which I do understand is not the most popular of opinions. But hey, what you gonna do?
So what the hell? Starling is gonna munch on some meat there.
But basically, how the book ending goes, Starling is more or less captured by Lecter at the very end, following her injury in the pig pen, and during that time, and now we get into the personal readings that people take with the book. A lot of people read the very ending like they fall in love at the end of it, and the whole thing becomes a love story. My reading, or the takeaway I've always taken with the ending, is that Hannibal effectively just brainwashes Starling, uses a different type of psychotropic drugs and basically isolating grooming techniques and just effectively breaks Starling's will, kind of breaks her mind. And at the end result, they end up together, if I remember correctly, have sex, both definitely eat Grendel's brain, and then we have like the closing act, which, was it in Vienna or where does the very last pages take place? I can't remember, but it's Barney, if memory serves me correctly, sees Lecter and Starling together in some fancy opera, and now they are like officially together, and there are like the closing lines of the book, which are kind of two minds. The closing lines goes something like, perhaps someday Starling will wake up, and then just kind of ends there and leaves it open. But to me, that's always read more like Lecter just brainwashes Starling, and the question remains like, will Clarice Starling someday wake up inside of her head, and can she someday somehow fight off the brainwashing, or is she just like forever lost for good? Who knows?
That's interesting, because Ray Liotta's character, Paul Grendeler, the colleague of Starling, is having his brain opened up a bit there at the end, and you're saying that that's, well, if not literally brain opening, but sort of like the manipulation that he goes through is the role of Starling in the book.
Yeah. Kinda. In some sense, perhaps, yeah.
So if that's so obvious as you make it sound to be in the book, then why the hell does Ridley Scott not understand that it's so obvious? Why does everybody have a problem with that?
The problem, I guess, that people have is the end result, that there are two, perhaps three things that really I could believe that irritate people with the ending. The first one of these is that there is a romantic tension between Hannibal and Starling. The common complaint with the book's ending is that it turns into a love story. In my opinion, the film can't escape this. It's a love story still at the very end, perhaps now one-sided love story that goes unfulfilled, but my reading of the book has been that it's one-sided love story that goes fulfilled in there. The second thing I can believe irritates people is simply the fact that Starling and Lecter end up together. Because no matter what reading you take from it, if there is something that Starling chooses free willingly, it's a betrayal of the character, or if that's something that Lecter forces upon her through brainwashing, then it's basically the destruction of character. In both cases, Starling ends up making the obvious wrong choice. She should just, arrest Lecter. And then she doesn't do that, be it because, she falls in love with him, or be it because she gets so goddamn brainwashed. It doesn't really change the fact that Clarice Starling, she either makes the wrong choice or she gets mentally destroyed. And the third part that most definitely irritates absolutely everybody, me including, is that there is actually a sex scene that happens between Hannibal and Starling.
Really pushing it. But nevertheless, here we go. Now with Julianne Moore in the role of Starling. And I'm strolling against this kind of actor swaps whenever it's not absolutely necessary. And I think it should have been a different agent altogether in this movie. Of course, that would change the dynamics of the film completely, but goddamn, we are changing the dynamics already with Julianne Moore. Well, Moore is okay, I guess, under the circumstances. I'm not sure how you would find as an actress, this kind of role interesting. Well, how do you psych yourself into this apart from the paycheck?
Yeah, in my opinion, I don't know what really drew Julianne Moore to pick this film. What was the driving motivation? If it wasn't the paycheck.
I guess the success of the... Because it was The Silence of the Lambs was the previous one.
Yeah, could be. Altogether, when it comes to Julianne Moore, I'm actually fine with movies making these character or actor changes. It didn't like. I do remember when Hannibal first came out as a film, and I first heard that Foster is not returning. I too also felt for a short time. I also was like, "What the hell? Why not?" It can't be the same film if it's not Jodie Foster. I got over that pretty quickly, though. So it's not a problem for me. And I do think that Hannibal just is plain and simply a story that can't work with another agent. Because so much of what ends up happening here is so tied up with this whole notion that there is a love story brewing and just can't have that with any other agent. Hannibal's whole, basically, well, his main motivation throughout the movie is Hannibal's interest / love towards Starling.
Yeah, which begs the question, if Jodie Foster was so desperate to be in The Silence of the Lambs, then what's this big 180?
I can understand why Jodie Foster didn't want to come anywhere near this one. Because in my opinion, Hannibal the book is not necessarily a portrayal of Clarice Starling's character. Hannibal the film, in my opinion, is a portrayal of both Hannibal Lecter's character and Clarice Starling's character.
Wow.
So, would I be in Jodie Foster's shoes? I would stay the hell away from this mess. Also,
well, this was a mess. Like this is nowhere near the story of The Silence of the Lambs. I think it's just kind of bumbles on, and there are plenty of scenes in Italy in gorgeous locations, but the movie perhaps fails to pick up the pace in the same way as Silence of the Lambs, and you know, it's just a completely different movie. It's a sort of completely, there is a killer on the loose. We're hunting this guy, and we find this guy, and more of a like more generic serial killer story than Silence of the Lambs, where you have the whole psychological messing at the cell thing.
I don't know. I actually think that basically the building blocks of Hannibal are all well and good. I actually think that for the most part, Hannibal had every possibility to be a really interesting film. And in my opinion, it also it takes a twist here, but in the end, it stays true to basically what has been the blueprint of Hannibal canon here. In its core, like you pointed out, it's a serial killer chase film where we have an institution that is trying to chase down after a serial killer. The changes here is that the serial killer in question is Hannibal Lecter, and the institution in question is not really FBI, it's Mason Verger, who is a private, I don't know, private serial killer hunting organization that doesn't do it on government's money like the FBI, but do it on his own dime. But that's really the core of the movie. It's a chase after Lecter, where one side tries to manipulate the circumstances in a way that they can capture Lecter. And I found that really interesting. I also, since you already brought up Florence as a location, this is actually where I do think that, where we can see the wheels coming off with the film. I'm headfast, strongly in the camp that the first half of the film, which is spent in Florence, is actually quite interesting. And I'm always interested when that moment picks up. Then at the middle point, almost exactly at the halfway point, the movie leaves Florence and moves to US. And to me, that halfway point, that moving to US is always the part where I feel that the movie stops working. And all the excitement just goes straight out of the window. Not in counting the ending scene when they have finally managed to capture Lecter. So, from my point of view, first half of the film in Florence, super interesting and always glued to the screen, and can't wait out to see how this plays out. And then I see that they move to US and I always lose interest. It happens almost exactly on a halfway mark.
Yeah.
It's like a half a really good movie. And then, unfortunately, there's also the other half still coming.
Yeah, like the archetype going on here. Rich, mutilated face wheelchair guy is obviously one of the villains here.
Although I do really love the face mutilated wheelchair guy, I do think that Mason Verger is really interesting bad guy.
Yeah, I'll give you that. We have two interesting characters, I feel. Both of them have something to contribute in sense of brain cells. Unfortunately, well, I don't know. Like this guy has prepared for this great moment with Hannibal Lecter for so long. Finally captures Lecter, then hasn't properly primed his crew, conditioned them for these outcomes that are plain as day, or should be plain as day for the staff. The dude is obviously obsessed with Lecter, but in the end, his staff betrays him. Cool.
Yeah, well, to Mason Verger's defense, in my opinion, that betrayal also comes completely out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, I can never figure out exactly why the Doctor betrays Mason Verger. Certainly, yeah, Mason was a jerk to him for in couple of scenes, but
yeah,
it's still like I know that Ridley Scott desperately tries to show us the Doctor's motivation for his betrayal, but I just never can actually see what Ridley Scott is trying to show me. When that betrayal happens, it's a really cool scene. I like the moment.
Yeah.
But I immediately afterwards, I'm always wondering, like, well, why the fuck did that actually happen?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Your boss was mean to you for a couple of times. Is that really the justification that you need to feed him to the pigs? What happens to your career afterwards, man?
Right.
How is your employment gonna continue from this? You can't be this thin-skinned. Even though, like Hannibal points out, he can and most definitely will just blame it on Lecter.
Right. Perfect
which
moment.
Is a smart move, but still, like, Verger is not a guy who is strapped for cash. So, losing the paycheck alone for something so petty and you boss just saying a couple of mean things to you. Like, for fuck's sake, I work for dimes, and I still have to swallow way more worse shit than what the Doctor has to take from Mason, so for fuck's sake.
Yeah, the whole situation also where Verger tells the backstory that how he cut his face up in front of Lecter, who, I don't know, was supposed to be having fake hotsies on Verger or whatever the situation was.
Verger was trying to sexually tempt Lecter, hoping that he would be homosexual.
Yeah, didn't seem to quite work out, but what seemed to be the good idea at the time was to cut up your face into pieces. Like you've noted, it doesn't really go into details more than that. Yeah, apparently he was under the influence of some things.
Yeah, the movie closes this whole thing over and just states that Lecter gave him a quote-unquote popper. was it was some drugs. That the book it does establish that Western crystal meth was some type of a concoction.
Yeah.
That of drugs that the Lecter gives him. But yeah, like you mentioned, the whole "I'm peeling off my face now" point, it kind of makes absolutely no sense, except in like early 90s, you took all that kids don't do cannabis fear-mongering campaigns way too seriously and actually swallowed the lie that if you smoke a joint, the next thing you are, or you take LSD, the next thing you are gonna do is you are gonna peel yourself like an orange. Like, if you were dumb enough to believe that, well, in that case, perhaps you can write a book where dude A gives dude B some drugs and the dude B just, peels his face off. Well, if that's not the case, I don't know what the hell Thomas Harris was thinking.
Well, is this just time to not talk about all the politically rather incorrect, or are they incorrect, moments in this series? Okay, we have a homosexual rich guy who cuts himself to pieces, thanks to Lecter.
Well, not necessarily homosexual. It's hard to say. What Mason Verger, first and foremost, he's a child molester. And there is a notion that he was trying to seduce Lecter, both in book and in the film. Is he really a homosexual? Don't actually know.
Okay.
He could just be also just a pedophile who tried to see if he could get away with seducing Lecter to get a more favorable for him psych eval from Hannibal. Could be also that case.
There is one quote that is directed towards Lecter when the character of Ray Liotta, Paul Krendler, says, I always figured him a queer due to his artsy-fartsy stuff. Mm-hmm. Not that I mean anything personal if you've got a lot of sympathy. Not quite really entered the 21st century here yet with Ridley Scott's movie. There are a couple of kind of quirky, weird moments like this. Another one in the same bandwagon. Really, Scott should really research his facts straight a bit more in this situation. There's the part about the rabbit badger HIV lady, which was just ludicrous. Something, quote, HIV positive lady who will spit and bite if she's cornered. Okay, but if on meds, she shouldn't be a risk. Yeah, this is outdated portrayal reflecting HIV stigma rather than medical reality. Even if they were not on medication, the spitting would pose zero risk, and biting would be an extremely low risk scenario.
Yeah, so when it comes to Evoda Tramgo, now if memory serves me correctly, Evoda was, it is stated that Evoda is HIV positive also in the book, but that line from spitting and biting is something that is film original. So that one goes to Scott. But of course, if you wanna talk about presentation in Hannibal Lecter movies, I guess that the biggest one, outside of course, over mental health overall, would be the transsexual presentation in Silence of the Lambs.
Right, we didn't even get there yet.
Yeah, which is perhaps the most complex and complicated talking point. And also the biggest talking point, because the transsexual presentation is something that has the longest shadow when it comes to, and the biggest harmful impact that, well, any of the Hannibal movies have had.
All right, give me a little primer on that.
Well, like you already mentioned, one of the Buffalo Bill's kind of personalities or identities that he has tried throughout his character his life. One of them is neo-Nazism, and the other one that is currently going on as The Silence of the Lambs happens and takes place would be transsexualism, as Buffalo Bill is a serial killer who, well, that the motive for his killings is the collection of women's skin, which he then uses and sews together in order to create a female skin suit for himself, as he is aiming to become a transsexual. And in this case, I most definitely I use the he pronoun and talk about him trying to become purposefully, because this one gets tricky. It is heavily argued, or not heavily, but it is argued, and in my opinion, both book and the film makes strong enough point that Buffalo Bill is not trans, not really. In film, this point is raised perhaps a bit problematically, as Hannibal Lecter, who has never met Buffalo Bill, just knows that Buffalo Bill is not a real trans person. But it's later emphasized, like you mentioned, with the swastikas in Bill's bedroom, which was a conscious choice from the set department to kind of put different things in Bill's home. Swastikas, the women's clothing, some paintings, kind of these kind of plug and play elements from different ideas and different ideologies, in order to drive into the audience's head that Bill is nothing of these identities completely. They are just things that he tries. Like, Buffalo Bill is not really a neo-Nazi, but he has tried to be a neo-Nazi when he has been experimenting with different identities. Buffalo Bill is not really a flower painting on your wall grandma, but he perhaps tries that identity. And from this you are supposed to draw the conclusion that Buffalo Bill is not really a trans person. It's an identity that he tries now because nothing else has worked for him in the past. And with that, well, and you know, in the book, on the other hand, there is a scene where they visit a clinic that gives you the treatments when you try to transition in your life. And in the clinic, they make an observation that transsexuals are not prone to violence, and they are more kind and polite, and usually are the targets of violence and not the perpetrators. There is drawn the point that, well, the FBI honing in on Buffalo Bill's possibility to be a trans person kinda is transphobic on itself. So both the book and the film, they kinda recognize that Bill's "I'm making a skin suit and gonna be a real woman" stick is something that can actually be harmful for real life transsexuals, and tries to kind of balance the odds. And partly I'm actually willing to and I'm willing to take the story's side here. I do strongly believe that Bill's skin suit stick, in the end, it comes from the crimes of real-life serial killer Ed Gein, who obviously was the inspiration that Thomas Harris drew from when he designed Buffalo Bill for The Silence. So, yeah, it's not really Harris and later on Demme in the movie trying to be transphobic, and they are trying to combat the notion of or the possibility of transphobic ideas being drawn from their work. But at the same time, the unfortunate everlasting effect of Silence of the Lambs, especially the film, and the fact that film became so goddamn popular and everybody has seen it, is that for years following the film's release, the usual transphobic stereotype that transphobes took and used to paint transsexuals in a bad light was that of Buffalo Bills. And I can't say that is like movie bad and movie should be cancelled for this, but it kind of, in my opinion, it does give an example of exactly how effective pop culture artifacts, like for example movies, can be both in expressing and sharing of ideas, and at the same time in the hands of an insidious party, breaking into parts and taking individual parts and then twisting them to serve your heinous ideas. To give an example, Silence of the Lambs kind of got the same treatment than what the real-life neo-Nazis gave to American History X, where they deliberately took an anti-Nazi movie and turned it into a and kind of managed to twist it into a pro-Nazi message.
Yeah, I think this just takes us back to the wider issue of what Hollywood has done all of its existence, that it's the very human nature thing that we take just the different quirks or differences in certain characteristics of people and then just use them to our advantage to fearmonger when it comes to your protagonist and antagonists. Antagonists are often described as they have some kind of physical quirks. We discussed this a lot during the James Bond movie episodes. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of no different here. I don't know, it's just a different target here. There were vocal protests when this movie also came out from the LGBT people. There were groups like Queer Nation and they demonstrated against this depiction in the film. And the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. Yeah, and when it comes to Jonathan Demme, he was taken aback by all these accusations of transphobia. And he defended the portrayal and insisted that they never intended Buffalo Bill to be seen as gay or transgender, I guess which would follow. I can see why it's problematic from a trans people's perspective, but we also have a character who is just, like you said, playing different kinds of roles, trying them on.
Yeah, I can understand why they got scared. Why LGBTQ community got scared of how trans people were, or got scared of Buffalo Bill in silence. I don't, like stated, I don't think that Silence of the Lambs is transphobic. And I don't think that Jonathan Demme directing the movie or Thomas Harris writing the book meant any harm. And I strongly believe, based on the evidence, that they were trying to mitigate any harm that could come from the work. But at the same time, LGBTQ plus community was correct in their scare because, well, despite what Harris and Demme tried to do, the transphobic bigots still managed to take the film and transform it into a transphobic propaganda, which kind of far outlasted the intended intentions of Demme and Harris.
Yeah, it did. To me, it's just like Buffalo Bill's pathology, which doesn't have much to do with transsexualism, if anything. I don't know, that the film, I wouldn't say that it's careful in any way with this topic, unlike what Jodie Foster claims, that it was very careful to make the point that it doesn't have anything to do with transsexualism, but I tend to disagree that it's kind of not clear.
I don't know, in that's a good question, like what is actually clear enough? How much can you expect from the audiences? Because to defend the film, we have the scene where Clarice Starling outright states that transsexuals are not hostile, they are caring and kind. We have the moment when Hannibal Lecter, and like mentioned, it is in one way this is also problematic because Hannibal Lecter has never met Buffalo Bill, but Hannibal Lecter states outright that Buffalo Bill is not really transsexual, he's just someone who strives to be one. And then we have the set designers, whatever they, and what they did with Bill's house. So we have kind of like three things where the movie tries to say that no, Buffalo Bill is not transsexual.
Yeah.
But then again, like you stated, it's not necessarily clear enough. And that's a fair criticism. If it wasn't clear enough for you, or if you felt that it's not clear enough, then obviously it's not clear enough. And the way how transphobes were able to twist the movie to serve their own agenda also kinda proves that it, wasn't clear enough. But it kind of, like mentioned, it kind of drives into a question like, what is clear and how much can we expect from the audiences?
Yup, and just the timing, especially when the film came out, that can be seen as problematic because there really wasn't like transsexualism or trans characters on screen, and then out comes something like Buffalo Bill, and he's a killer, murderer. Mm. So sure.
Yeah, it's the same problem that the Hitchcock Psycho ran into. Like, also, I don't believe that Hitchcock intended Psycho to be transphobic film and have an anti-trans message in it. I strongly believe that, Norman Bates wearing his grandma's clothes was just like a shock tactic to showcase to you that he's sick in the head, and also perhaps some type of a low-key, like Norman Bates also, when Robert Bloch wrote Psycho, he also drew inspiration from Ed Gein's crimes. So it's also most likely in Hitchcock film, the cross-dressing is most likely a remnant also from that, from the original source material. But once again, also Norman Bates was used as a transphobic stereotype. So, and that kind of leads into a larger question, like, how much does it merit what was the author's intent? Like, yeah, Thomas Harris didn't intend Silence of the Lambs to be a transphobic text, and Jonathan Demme didn't intend to direct a transphobic movie, and most likely Hitchcock didn't also intentionally make a possible transphobic text involving movie. But then the end result is an anti-trans stereotype. So how much does the director's and writer's intention weight on the scale versus kind of what eventually turned out to be the effect?
Didn't intend to do a transphobic movie, but maybe it was something subconscious choice to. If you look at the film, I don't know so much about the book, but if you look at the film, it has these extreme close-ups of the lips and taking the time to, also combined with the dialogue, to emphasize this point of the character. So even if they tried to push the agenda that this is not about transphobia, it kind of, the audience has to now connect these close-ups with the character, and I mean, how can you escape it? It's maybe not transphobia, but it's putting trans people maybe a little bit of a tough position for sure.
Yeah. And it did put trans people in a tough position for a better part of a decade. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Usually I would defend the movie and the filmmaker's intentions. And in a way, I wanna defend them also here because the intention wasn't malicious in Silence. This is not like Birth of a Nation, where the director most definitely intended to make a racist film and portray the black people in the most negative light possible. It's not that case, but the effect was very similar.
Yeah.
But then again, in these moments, I'm like mentioned, I'm reminded of American History X, which is so in your face anti-neo-Nazi movie that can be, and neo-Nazis still manage to twist it to serve their own worldview, and in a crafty narrative where neo-Nazi, where American History X is this secretly based movie where this Jewish director is trying to expose or is talking past the Hollywood censorship machine to give you the real message about how cool it is to be a neo-Nazi. So basically, like coming from that, coming from the twisting of American History X, it looks to me like you can't make a film that is quote unquote woke enough that it couldn't be twisted then to serve your purpose. In that case, like something like Silence is kind of playing a losing game. Like no matter what it does, it can't actually escape the possibility that it will be used in this case as a transphobic propaganda if somebody wills it enough.
Yeah, this is what many people only knew about trans behavior or the trans people for a long time, back when we still didn't have access to internet and all those dark ages.
Kind of also what people in many cases still seem to know about trans people. Like if you just take like the current legislation in US, well, I don't really think that the presentation is going any better there. Seeing the laws that are now being passed, it seems like the people in charge are still operating under the illusion that trans people are like Buffalo Bill.
Yeah. Well,
or J.K. Rowling, who is really open about this shit. So it's kind of like the hurt that Silence of the Lambs managed to cause, even though it didn't intend it, and even though it perhaps there never was a possibility that it could not cause that harm, but the harm even today kind of lingers on.
Yeah. Rowling is also one of those people who has taken she has taken it too strongly to one direction and just completely is being blindsided to all the different nuances that she should have in her argumentation. But basically what I've read from her comments on Twitter, it just amounts to internet trolling mostly, bringing attention to her comments by really provoking people instead of having a real discussion.
Oh, well, then again, in Rowling's air quotations defense, Rowling is one of those few people who actually really puts her money where her mouth is. So it's like with Rowling, it's just not Twitter comments. She also does the work.
Yeah,
and puts in the money, which perhaps makes her even more honorable transphobe than the rest of the bunch, who are just like doing just all the things that are free.
Yeah, well, maybe on a more positive note, if anything, the controversy that surrounded Lambs, it did help to then finally catalyze some support and change of atmosphere for LGBT in Hollywood, with the support of different organizations like the GLAAD, which helped to change the representation in movies. So yeah, I don't know, maybe Lambs was the catalyst for a bigger change. Lambs is not the only one that is having these problems. There are problematic presentations I've heard in Dress to Kill and Sleepaway Camp, Ace Ventura.
Yeah, South Park. It's a basically like if you wanna follow Hollywood and problematic presentation, like, let's say that you play on easy mode and you just follow wanna look how far the problematic presentation with trans people go. It's like you can spend a better part of a decade here doing your research and just going like forward and forward in the past of cinema history to like find the first time when problematic presentation was given. If you, on the other hand, you do the hard mode and like look for just overall problematic presentation of anything in film, I think, well, I don't even think, I know, you have to go into the fucking birth of the cinema itself.
Yeah.
Like, you have to look at those very first movies that ever were made. And already in those you find problematic presentation. So in that case, it's a never-ending nightmare.
Well, if we take the sum, the total effect of Lambs, well, it was... At least I think it still resonates as a negative effect. Yeah.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
There were, like you mentioned, there were positive things that came out from the backlash.
So it's not really like black and white, but...
It's not black and white, but it's way more black than it's white. we are nowhere near the gray here. Not at all.
Despite whatever the intentions were.
But from there, from the transphobia in Lambs, we can finally get back into what you said originally about Hannibal the film and Paul Grendel and his homophobic comment that he makes. Which he makes in both in movie and in the book. And it is basically like once again, the intention here, in my opinion, is clear. And this is like when I was really interested in your views in Lambs, and when I wanted to hear like what you felt about and how you thought about Lecter. This is where that point drives home, because in Hannibal, Paul Grendeler's homophobic statement is solely for the purpose of, well, taking a dude who was just a faceless bureaucrat number 5 in Lambs, and now turning him into an more easily hateable bad guy in Hannibal.
Yeah, that's true.
Is a weird approach that Thomas Harris and in my opinion the world at large seem to took with the characters of Hannibal universe, and also through this reverse with the Hannibal Lecter himself. Because the point of the reverse is to make Hannibal Lecter seem more sympathetic to the audiences, less of a monster, more of a killer of killers, the necessary evil. And to do that, they are willing to basically sacrifice every other character from Hannibal universe. Paul Grendel, who barely was a character in Silence of the Lambs, now get to serve as a minor antagonist who gets to throw around a homophobic lines just so that you can more easily hate him. Hannibal's adversary here, Mason Verger, is, especially in the book, he's a child tier drinking pedophile, so that he can be even more detestable than Hannibal Lecter himself. And Dr. Chilton, who mostly was just an opportunistic asshole in the Lambs, now in the movie is literally stated that he was a bad man. So that you don't have to feel bad for the fact that Hannibal Lecter has killed Chilton behind the scenes between the movies. And that, my friend, that is fucking wild.
Yeah.
And this is the reason when you were talking about Hannibal Lecter, when we were talking about Silence of the Lambs, and you were talking about how you liked him more than Buffalo Bill. This is precisely the reason why I was so interested, like, where do those feelings come from? Because, hey, just look at Ridley Scott, you are not alone with that feeling. Ridley Scott spent, what, $80 million to make certain that everybody understands that he likes Hannibal Lecter more than these other monsters, and Hannibal Lecter is not really that bad of a guy if you think about it.
Even though he disagreed with the ending of the film. I mean, if he likes Hannibal as much as he claims to, based on what you're saying, then hello, why not just go with the original ending? Just do it.
Well, because the original, well, depending on what reading you take, but if you side with me that Hannibal Lecter just purely brainwashes Starling at the end of the book, well, in that case, Hannibal Lecter is more heroic and more likable in the film's ending, where he loves and respects Starling so very much that he can't even cause physical harm to her.
You know what I thought about that homophobic comment from the agent? I thought that it's just something along with all the HIV comments from before. It all goes back to how Ridley Scott directs movies. Like, I think this is hardly not the first time when Ridley Scott goes a little bit, shall we say, politically incorrect in his films. Am I wrong with that?
Most likely no. Or most likely no, you are not wrong with that. And most likely, yeah, this isn't the first time where Ridley Scott does this. That brings up the question of, well, can you give us an example? And I quickly, right on this moment, actually can't think of any example because I can't remember Ridley Scott films well enough. But goddamn, give me a week and the Ridley Scott filmography, and most likely I can actually find you a boatload of examples.
There are maybe some small moments. I can't give you an example right now.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard thing to do, to just on the moment remember dude's entire filmography and pick it apart piece by piece to find the problematic moments. But most definitely, yeah, they do exist there somewhere.
Oh well, but Hannibal Rising?
Yeah, why not? It is the final film.
It is the
in the lineup.
For now.
The movie famously that well, only the Laurentiis wanted to make.
Yeah, Harris was on board on this one. So much on board that he was reluctantly on board. This came about in an unusual way compared to the rest, where Dino De Laurentiis was pressing Harris to write it. Right! And there was like the Red Dragon Press tour in 2002, and the journalist kept asking, "Oh, Hannibal Lecter, how did he become a monster? Tell me." So Dino De Laurentiis was all ears. Aha, I sense an opportunity here. And thus this movie. And the book.
Mm-hmm. And in this case, like, bears to stress out that, like usually, there are times when we simply have been speculating on this podcast, like, was somebody forced to make this film or write this script, and how much the producers insisted on you doing this or that change. But Hannibal Rising, the book, is most definitely, like Dino Laurentiis has repeatedly bragged about the fact that he forced and blackmailed Harris to write it by threatening Harris that if Harris won't write the book, Laurenti is going to find someone else who does write it. Because Laurenti still had the rights, the film rights, and therefore rights to make Hannibal content. Except, of course, when it comes to Silence of the Lambs, because those rights were loaned to Orion, which creates a really fucking interesting copyright gridlock between two different studios, which in no way came back and bite everybody in the ass when the TV series Hannibal and Clarice were in production.
Yeah, speaking of content, how did the TV Hannibal adventure go?
I really liked it. I was saddened when they cancelled it after 3 seasons. It takes its time before it started to work. I wasn't on board after seeing the first episodes, but something like 3 or 4 episodes into the first season, I really got into it and became a fan. The TV series Clarice, on the other hand, it wasn't bad, but it also wasn't anything special. It was kind of like, if you would ask, like, what was different between Clarice and Criminal Minds, or insert here any police procedural, I couldn't actually give you the answer.
I recall, was it this case that you told me in some of our episodes that the Clarice was they had trouble with some of the rights, so they couldn't use the name Hannibal.
Yeah. They have to refer to Hannibal Lecter throughout different types of innuendos.
Yeah.
Like, did you interview that one shrink who eats people? Yes, I did. Okay. And also, like we talked about Paul Krendler. Krendler's character actually, and this is where you get the stupidity going. God damn, late prequel content. But as already mentioned, Paul Krendler, faceless government bureaucrat number 5, turns into an active bad guy in Hannibal. Well, Clarice, the TV series, takes place between Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal. And Paul Krendler is portrayed as, well, the best guy on the task force. And with best, I don't mean like as an investigator, but as a boss. He's a really caring and compassionate boss who's really on Clarice Starling's side and wants what's best for her. His biggest problem with Starling is that he's afraid that since Starling captured Buffalo Bill, Starling kinda ushers in this celebrity investigator culture into FBI or police work, but he actually does not hate Starling in any way. He's Starling's not the best friend, but the friend boss that she can have.
He enjoys the cat and mouse.
No, he's just all around a good guy. And then, then you are supposed to remember that this is the same character who is the complete asshole in Hannibal. So, like, yeah. Try to flap your brain around that one.
Mind games and mentor figures, big themes of this franchise.
Still doesn't explain the character shift that happens.
Yep.
Like there's no illusion in nothing in Clarice, nothing alludes that Krendler is trying to play any mind games at all. And that, kids, is exactly why you shouldn't actually do. Well, this happened with these characters in the past, after there's a movie or TV show has come up. Like, the prequel idea is a bad idea.
Yeah, it's usually a bad idea. I think at least we are heavily cringing whenever these kind of prequel ideas are coming into play, when you have already made 5 sequels and then you bring up the prequel. But here we are. I have not too much to say about Hannibal Rising 2007 film, except what I already said previously that it is a film that takes the character of Hannibal and basically, well, butchers it from our previous understanding completely. This is now some kind of a man in a cape who out to save the day from all the bad people, at least the bad people who wronged him. Yeah, this makes me think also the additional question, is this where Harris is starting to, well, I don't want to be sued here, but what's happening with Harris here? Is he falling in love a little bit too much with his serial killer?
In my opinion, like the short answer is yes.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, he kind of already did that years back. The moment, like, now that I have once again revisited all of these films in preparation for today's episode, one of the questions that has been going around in my mind repeatedly is like, when did actually Harris fall in love with his character? When was that point? Because there is a kind of a continuing difference in portrayal of a Lecter throughout this franchise. We already alluded towards to this when we were talking about Red Dragon, but in Red Dragon, Hannibal Lecter is pretty much just a bit player. Shows up for 3 scenes in total, is in lockup all the time, and when Graham talks about Lecter, he just talks about how Lecter is this undecipherable monster. In Red Dragon, Lecter is meant to be this incorporeal boogeyman that looms over the proceedings, kinda in spirit, but he's never actually physically part of anything. And then in Silence of the Lambs, Lecter gets more screen time. And Silence of the Lambs, if I remember correctly, the book cover in the English publication, it was advertised that Hannibal Lecter is back. So Hannibal Lecter is given more of a spotlight. Also, Lecter himself changes somewhat in portrayal, because both in Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs, Lecter is a kind of a mentor figure to our investigator. Not so much in Red Dragon, but there he also gives a couple of supporting chats with Will Graham, and on the sideline of that tries to get Will's family killed. In Silence of the Lambs, Lecter is directly the investigation aiding ally to Clarice Starling, who makes a direct point that he does not wish to harm Starling. So we are kind of coming from this, you barely see him, and his advancement to the case is pretty minimal, and he tries to kill our main hero character too. Well, he has a hell of a lot more screen time, and he's directly helpful to the investigation in his own cryptic ways, and he does not try to kill our main hero type of bad guy. But in Silence of the Lambs, he still is a monster.
Yeah.
Through and throughout, as we see in his prison escape.
Yeah.
And then we land on Hannibal, where, especially on the film, he now is pretty much the main character. The whole chase revolves around him. He's the lesser of two evils, because Verger is he still is like a goddamn pedophile. He has now a code of conduct where he kills, well, if not just bad people, well, just rude people, as Barney points out. Bunch of characters who were not bad guys in the past, like Chilton and Crandall, are now turned into bad guys, especially on the film. And overall, we are now supposed to, well, if not sympathize with Lecter, at least root for him not to get caught.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we land into, like you point out, into Hannibal Rising, where he now turns into some type of a, as you said, a caped crusader. Not masked Batman, the vigilante of the night.
Some sort of failed protagonist here.
some type of a failed protagonist, and like the story is in your face on the fact that you are now supposed to root for Lecter because
it's strange, and then to combine it with the fact that this is a very simple revenge story to my eyes, and there is really nothing else to this story, unlike in the previous entries where we have all kinds of twists and turns. Here, forget about that. It's as straightforward as can be.
Yeah. And the biggest, like the most interesting aspect of Hannibal Rising story is, and you don't get much of this, but there are a couple of pretty in-your-face moments where they are questioning about what is individuals' responsibility for war crimes and what happens during the wartime. The best example here is the scene where they execute that one dude who aided the Nazis in grouping the Jews. And before he's being beheaded, he asks our investigator, Popol, like, where were the cops when the Nazis forced him to do... when the Nazis used physical torture to force him to tell where the Jews are hidden. It's really in your face, but it's a good question. Like, what is that inspector's, and in a larger sense, what is the legal system's responsibility for the fact that they weren't at the time there to protect that man from being tortured by the Nazis, which led into the crime for which he now is being beheaded? It's a good question. Sad that the movie doesn't actually study that further, but what the movie does do, to the umpteenth fucking degree, is much like with Grendel and his homophobic line in Hannibal. They now use the status of our the bad guys' status as war criminals as something that is supposed to be an easy to excuse, kind of a gateway excuse for it to be okay for Hannibal be killing these people.
Yeah.
The word war criminal is dropped like something like 10 to 15 times in course of this film.
It's a successful choice of an actor, at least for the lead role, I thought.
Now begs the question, like, what do you mean lead role? Do you mean...
Yeah, lead Lecter.
No, absolutely not. Jesus Christ, that went nowhere and fast. Yeah, to Kasper Uliel's defense, the boy does try. He does try. He smirks in almost every second scene that this film has, but I was not feeling it. I was not feeling it at all. It was kind of a like 2 days stale coffee trying to pass as a cappuccino.
Well, I can say that it wasn't a complete failure to me either. Well, if you ask director Peter Weber, he said that he was born to be in this role.
Yeah, I've heard these same remarks. I also heard the story that Dino De Laurentiis was heavily involved in the casting decision for the young Hannibal Lecter here, and the Uliel would have been extremely hesitant to take the part, feeling that Anthony Hopkins' performance would have set such a high bar that nobody could ever reach it, and it would have taken the ages of it would have taken a good deal of time from the director and producer to convince him to take on the role. Yeah, I've heard all of this, and I'm willing to believe that this is how the casting for Hannibal Lecter went. And I don't wish any ill will towards young Casper here, but oh boy, this he just does not work for me. He doesn't manage to sell anything here. Not even his evil nature.
Well, I definitely don't buy him as the same Lecter as Anthony Hopkins as Lecter, but he does some kind of a Lecter.
He does the Vanilla Ice Cream Lecter. He does the "Hey, I too comb my hair back" Lecter. In a way, he may be a right Lecter for this story, because something like Anthony Hopkins, like if they would have just taken old man Anthony Hopkins and cast him here and be like, don't just deal with it. Don't think too much about this 60-year-old man trying to portray this 20-year-old character. If they would have taken that approach, but well, that Anthony Hopkins couldn't have showed us the dark Avenger that we get here in this film. And in that sense, like yeah, Casper can kind of work. Like he looks good when he rides a motorbike. I give him that much. But that unfortunately is the limit where I can go with my praises.
Well, after all, they tried to connect the Red Dragon, which was completed in 2002, this version of Anthony Hopkins with Silence of the Lambs, shot in 1991, supposed to be the follow-up to Red Dragon's ending. Then
that worked. That worked still, like not greatly, but it actually. Well, I still managed to swallow that.
Yeah.
Wasn't too distracting.
But yeah, there's stuff that happens on the boat, and there's a lady who is ultimately not so much in love with Lecter, because he is, after all, she sees it so that he has become something too evil. There's nothing to love about poor little Lecter, who just tried to save the world a little bit here.
Yeah, that's kind of the answer to the question, I guess. Like, how Lecter became a student-eating, paramedic-murdering, capsulizing serial killer, and the answer is he wasn't loved enough. One time in France.
Oh no. Or it's just that now Lecter, even though he had done some decent kills morally, I guess, but now on the boat he just loses every sense, every fiber of respectability in the lady's eyes. The lady is like the morality police here, and then off we go to more adventures with less acceptable kills.
Yeah. The point that the story tries to make is that what happened in Lecter's past made him put him on the line that he becomes a serial killer, and then on the boat when he finally realizes that he too have taken part in eating his own sister. That's just way too much, and it breaks his mind and pushes him
somehow
over the dark side, and now he is a cannibalistic serial killer, and I'm buying none of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely no.
Yeah. Can't really buy that he would forget such an important detail of his career.
Well, the story tries to argue that he was barely conscious when he ate his sister.
Yeah, because of trauma.
Soup form.
Such a big trauma.
Which is kind of like begs the question, like, what, you goddamn idiot. All these years, like, what the hell did you think you were eating? Like you know that your sister, you know that the house had no food whatsoever. You know that your sister was murdered, and you know that all the soldiers ate your sister, and then you ate something. So where the fuck do you think that the soup that you yourself were eating, what did you think that came from, if not from your sister? Like what meat did you think in your head that they had cooked for you?
But I think that just this comes to full circle that you shouldn't make any aspect of Hannibal Lecter sympathetic. Not really.
Well, obviously not. But you also shouldn't fall in love with your own character. Like here's a newsflash for Thomas Harris. Hannibal Lecter is a fictional character. He's not gonna suck your dick, no matter what you try. So this whole exercise is completely pointless.
There we have it. I've spoken enough of this film. Got nothing to add.
Well, I can add that I don't actually completely hate Hannibal Rising. I think it's okay film.
It's not.
On
It's
its
really
own
not.
right.
It's really a boring film.
I find it like this is a reverse situation from Hannibal. And Hannibal, I strongly think that the first half of the movie is really exciting and the second half is a really boring movie. Well, here we have a second 2 hour long film where I think that the first hour is really boring. I just can't wait for it to end. But the second half, when he finally actually, when he finds the dog tags, and he finally starts to hunt down the soldiers and kill them one by one.
I don't care.
I actually felt that was actually quite interesting as a like a revenge vigilante thriller sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't work as a Hannibal Lecter movie at all, but it's an okay vigilante revenge thriller. The second half of Hannibal Rising was more exciting than the first Death Wish, which we also watched for this podcast.
I give you that much. Henrik, the performance pedestal out of all these movies, who's the actor that you wanna raise to spotlight?
There's a hell of a lot of really good performances throughout, well, all of these films. I don't think there's a movie in this franchise that has just bad actors, because even Hannibal Rising has Dominic West as Inspector Pascal Popil and Gong Li as Lady Murasaki. So we have at least and the bad guys also gave good performances in that film. So, but from all of these, I don't know if it comes to legacy. It's Ted Levine as Buffalo Bill or Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. Both had an enormous cultural impact. In Anthony Hopkins' case, it was a good impact. In Levine's case, unfortunately, it was a decade-long lasting transphobic stereotype. But fuck it, because everybody else is going to expect that I choose Hopkins. I go with Levine.
Okay. Impactful role, yes.
Both good in good and bad, unfortunately.
Obviously Hopkins, but obviously I'm just gonna go with Brian Cox, who also does a pretty good job as Dr. Lecter in Manhunter. So, props for doing the Lecter before the Lecter.
And giving a completely different type of performance than what Hopkins ended up doing. Like these are most like two completely different types of Lecters, which is a praise for both for Cox and Hopkins.
Yeah.
Neither one of these guys had the need to copy other guys' homework.
So, what worked in the Lecter or Hannibal movies, Henrik?
The bad guys, I feel, at the times, it's either on the border of being bad shit, especially Verger with his like pedophilic past, especially in the book where he drinks the tears, which is kind of going overboard. But altogether, I do like the bad guys in these stories, even in Hannibal Rising, which has the most boring bad guys. But I still like the opposition that our heroes face in these stories, especially in the early parts of the series. I like the way how the FBI is depicted as an institution, where it's a grouping of motivated professionals using their individual field to form a unit that is dead centered on catching the killers. And then it's really sad to see that in Hannibal, FBI is completely corrupt and is in no way capable as an institution. And I like the overall atmosphere of these movies. I have a kind of a soft spot for serial killer chaser films, especially when they have some dread atmosphere. But I do like the atmosphere here. Even in the cases like Red Dragon, where Will Graham and the FBI are half imbecilic and half impotent, and Lecter basically just has to read the script and give them spoon feed the plot points. But even there, I do like the atmosphere that is going on when the chase is on.
Yeah, again, in an obvious note, Hopkins, but I do enjoy the kind of the imagery here, the moth as a theme, death and transformation. I kind of like the cannibalism and the psychological consumption combined with it, the duality of the different human natures here. The villains, yeah, or the villain. I do like the theme of changing or becoming something I think in all of these movies in some sense. The transformation of Lecter in a sense. Whether it's gathering more power, whether it's changing the dynamics of the character when he gets out of some situation, some environment. Or if it's just the scenes with Giancarlo Giannini, yeah, in the Italy scenes with Hopkins. I do enjoy the play of these characters together, and it's fun to see Giancarlo Giannini again playing a cop.
Actually, been a long time since I have seen that guy in any film.
Casino Royale.
Yeah, now that you mentioned, most likely the most recent I've seen him. Now, not counting in my rewatch of Hannibal for this episode.
So what did not work?
Well, this is a franchise problem here, but in course of the series, the tone kind of goes here and there and out of the window, and it's ups, downs, sideways, and loopy loops. Basically, the same thing kind of also happens with the world surrounding our characters. Like I already mentioned, like the FBI starts off by being a capable professional institution, and then in Red Dragon it can't do anything right, and then in Hannibal it's now all of a sudden evil, and then in Hannibal Rising, well, FBI does not exist, but its closest counterpart would be the local French police, which also can't even tie its own shoelaces. So it's kind of like a roller coaster ride of where we actually are landing with these movies. And it's in a way it's interesting, and in a way it's exciting.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's also kind of tiring.
Yeah, in a way the Hannibal movies remind me of Daniel Craig's tenure as James Bond. Like, you would like to think that it's like a chronological story that was thought out from the beginning, but obviously it is not. It's kind of the same issue that plagues the Hannibal series, where you have a series of books, but you can't even follow the goddamn books. And not to mention that you then make supposedly one last book. Yeah, we'll see about that. Which is like forced by the producer of the films, bringing its own share of problems to the series. There is no the same level of consistency in the movies as is in the books, and that can be also argued on the part of Hannibal for sure. But what didn't work, in my part, shift from psychological tension to gore didn't exactly work, like to more gore direction. In Hannibal, more focus on that. The tone and pacing of Hannibal Rising may not exactly work, or just the simplicity of the story. Apart from a few mentioned, the part that you said that could have been explored a little bit further on the whole, crucifying the Nazi situation. Lost opportunities. The inconsistencies in the narrative and structure in Hannibal, unlike with Silence, which is a totally different beast, if you will. And we already discussed on the problematic representation of certain characters. Describe Hannibal films in one word.
My word for Hannibal film series would be metamorphing, because that's what this series most definitely is. Like it starts with pretty tight cocoon, and from there it goes through this, for better and worse, it goes through this cycle of change, where you perhaps kind of can see like how one stage links to the previous one through some throwaway line somewhere that was given. Somebody alludes to a victim that later on comes the main antagonist. Someone alludes to a dead family that later on becomes an unnecessary origin story. But even though you can see the linkage, at the same time, the next phase is always something where you are kind of thinking like, how in the hell did we end up here now?
Yeah, I would just go with fleshy. It works in so many ways. Even if the film like Lambs is fleshy in a dialogue sense, performance sense, story sense, tight delivery sense, well, even if we get to something like Hannibal Rising, it's not quite there on those fronts, but it's still fleshy.
I'm just suspecting that you are getting too hungry at this point.
I'm just getting too tired at this point, honestly.
The recording session has been going on for 15 hours now, and you haven't gotten a bite to eat.
Yeah, I'm getting ravenous.
Yeah, that's also a good film about cannibalism.
Complete the sentence. You really know you're watching Hannibal films. When?
When your psychopathic serial killer turns into a husband of the year simply because a Japanese lady said mean words once on a French boat. And yet, Hannibal Lecter is not an incel snowflake, you guys.
You really know you're watching the Hannibal films. When your main flesh-munching antagonist turns into your flesh-munching protagonist. Ta-da!
It's a magic trick of its own kind.
Did you like these films?
Yeah. In one way or the other, I did like all of these films. How much and to which point, it's a shifting goalpost. With some movies, my patient kind of run more thin than with the other, but in all of these, I did find something, at least some aspects that I liked.
Yeah, aesthetics-wise, these have never quite been my kind of movies. This is just a personal preference. Did I like these films? I enjoy Silence of the Lambs. I did kind of enjoy here and there. I did enjoy some of the Italy stuff in Hannibal, for better or worse, because of the cinematographic work, because of the play with the two characters. I have to say I have to go more with the kind of less polished look in every sense of Manhunter compared to Red Dragon. Yeah, mostly enjoyable watches. I would definitely not return to Hannibal Rising. I have no reason to. But there is, if you're looking for thriller / horror-esque movies with storytelling skills for a change, then this could be your kind of series. With the caveat that the continuity from one movie to the next is lacking. Would you ever rewatch these films? I kind of alluded on that direction already, but what's your view?
Most likely, yeah, to all of them. Like at some point, I don't know about Hannibal. Well, most likely, yeah.
Yeah, well, Silence of the Lambs I've seen many times. In the sense of, is it a good movie or not? Yes, I would watch it again. The other ones, I don't have a particular reason to come back to them. Apart from maybe, perhaps something about the performance of Hopkins would be interesting to revisit a bit in Hannibal and compare it how it was handled in The Lambs. I enjoyed watching Hopkins, surprise, in the movie, at least the first half. But would you recommend these films, Henrik?
Seeing how we are talking about 5 movies in total, I guess I'm gonna divide this in the which ones I recommend and which ones I don't, and I'm gonna start with the ones that I do recommend. So first of all, of course, Silence of the Lambs. It's, for me, the aesthetic of these movies just purely works, and in that regard, I do think that Silence of the Lambs it's kind of like Fincher's Seven. It's one of those serial killer movies that absolutely everybody should see. It's a really well made movie. I'm not surprised that it became the pop cultural behemoth that it became, and it has career-making performances. Well, both like Hopkins and Ed Foster. They were film stars before this, but after Silence, they were in a whole another ballpark. So same way with Levine. So basically, in all regards, I do think that Silence of the Lambs is, I would say, it's a mandatory watch for anyone who is interested in serial killer fiction. If that's a hard no to you, well, then the whole franchise is a hard no pass. But everybody else, in my opinion, should check it out. Manhunter, I do recommend it. It's an early years Michael Mann film. It's not Michael Mann's aesthetic, his style is not yet as defined as it is later on, for example, in Heat and Collateral, but it's a good film nevertheless. It really well nails down the idea that there is an institution, a group of professionals chasing down the one guy. In my opinion, it really well nails down the feeling of a chase. Like in Manhunter, it really is a hunt. And when I compare it to Eastwood's White Hunter, Black Heart, I get the same type of vibes from it. Like it's a hunt and it's a tale of an obsession at the same time, and the murky waters were doing the right thing, and your personal obsession that is driven by your need to capture something that is wild, and just like having the possibility to say that I capture that thing kind of drives you. It also has a magnetic performance from William Peterson, who, even though, Edward Norton is Edward Norton, but he's Will Graham, in my opinion, is the better of the two performances. With Peterson, you get kind of the sense that at the same time, he has this ability, which he also is kind of disgusted by, and he also is kind of teetering on the point of snapping. There's a scene in Manhunter when Graham goes to meet Lecter, and Lecter remarks that the reason why Graham came to visit him is because they are of the same type, and Graham just wants to get the scent back, and Graham should just, take a sniff of himself, because they are not that different. And Peterson actually sells you this idea of Graham. Like he's a somebody who could be either the good or the bad. And luckily for the moment he's of the good. Coming from there to Red Dragon, I do recommend it, but it's kind of a lukewarm recommendation. In my opinion, I don't hate the film. In my opinion, it's perfectly good and solid Bosch 2000s Hollywood serial killer film. The biggest problem with the movie is that it's kind of hard to say exactly why you should watch it. It doesn't have the stylistic and atmospheric edge of Michael Mann's thriller. Then again, at the same time, the Dollarhide character is a bit more smarter in Red Dragon, and there are aspects of the story that are more fleshed out in Red Dragon, but at the still it kind of feels a bit unnecessary. And my favorite comparison here comes from the YouTube channel Why the Book Wins, which made the point that both Manhunter and Red Dragon has a scene where Dollarhide takes Reba to see sedated tiger. In Manhunter, Reba lays her head on top of the tiger's chest, puts her bare ear there to listen to the tiger's heartbeat. And in Red Dragon, there is the same scene, except now someone from the staff offers Reba a stethoscope, which she then uses to listen to the tiger's heartbeat. So one of these films is really hands down, it's very intimate, it's down on the level, and the second one is technically perfectly okay and not a bad movie in any sense, but it doesn't have that direct contact. It's something made through an instrument. It's a heartbeat listened through a stethoscope. And because of that, it's a look from my end. Hannibal Rising, no recommendation. I want to stretch out, I don't hate Hannibal Rising. I do think that it's a 2-hour film where the later hour is enjoyable enough vigilante revenge thriller, but it's nothing special in any way. And when it comes to Hannibal's character, it's completely unnecessary. It's extremely pointless. Like, this is the movie that tries to explain like why Hannibal became the Hannibal he is, and in that sense, I do think that the explanation given is so piss poor and so thin that it's bordering on a character assassination on Lecter's part. Not a terrible film, not completely terrible film, but the first half is something that I have here buckets of paint that dry faster than the first hour goes by. And you know what good is to find on the second half does not really salvage or save the situation. So nope. And when it comes to Hannibal from Ridley Scott, yeah, no recommendation. It's an interesting piece in the sense that, well, like we have heavily discussed tonight, the character of Hannibal changes a hell of a lot depending on like what story is going on and who is actually directing the character. And in that sense, Hannibal makes an interesting case study of how one character kind of is turned from the monster to some type of a best boyfriend forever kind of guy who still has a little bit of an edgy streak going on, but at the same time, like, the second half is just an unfathomably boring. It's a really interesting how from someone who, like Ridley Scott, can come a film that has a so clear point, like such of a clear moment, after which it just becomes a extremely slow and boring movie. Like, you would think that coming from Ridley, even if Ridley Scott would make a bad film, which he has made several, he still could mask it in a way that you wouldn't actually be so easy to say that, oh, this is the point when this movie starts to suck. But somehow in Hannibal, you can exactly pinpoint the precise second and frame where the movie loses you. So in that case, yeah, it's a fascinating case study, but fascinating case study does not mean a movie that anybody should watch. So even if, you know, you could perhaps put on Hannibal Rising and see like a 1 hour of vigilante revenge things going on. Well, in Hannibal you can put it on and see the first hour of interesting man chase going on, and then it just flatlines. So yeah, no recommendation for Hannibal.
All right. One thing that is also a fascinating case study is The Silence of the Lambs, but in a more positive note, universally acclaimed as a masterpiece of the psychological horror and thriller and so on and so forth. So I think you should watch it, even if it isn't like aesthetically necessarily your cup of tea, even if you do not really think that it's a completely flawless masterpiece, like in my case. I think it still pays to watch it. It's great entertainment, and you will get the culturally and artistically and cinematically significant work that still resonates to this day. Not all for positive reasons, but yeah, Lambs is a fantastic movie, no doubt about it, and everybody should have it in their watch list, if not already watched for some reason. Manhunter, there's a lot of movies that feel like Manhunter in its genre. I don't think that Manhunter does anything so dramatically revolutionary that you should necessarily watch it. But I will still give it a recommendation. It's a stylish but dated, good for genre fans and those who are a little bit on the completionist side with things to watch, of course. But like you, I do think that there are some performances to watch there. And like already alluded, I prefer it to Red Dragon. Red Dragon movie, which overall doesn't have anything really wrong with it, but it is the same movie all over again. And I do prefer the performance, like you do, of William Peterson to Edward Norton's in this role. But then again, Red Dragon has Edward Norton, Ray Fiennes, and Hopkins there. It's hard, I guess, not to recommend also Red Dragon in that sense. The powerful performances and it just being an overall okay movie, but yeah, it's dangling on the edge in the sense of it's a well executed movie. It's an interesting psychological duel movie, but it's not as original as I felt that Manhunter was, even though it might come with the, feeling the movie a little bit more fresh when it's so different from in the entire selection of these movies. But fine, well, yeah, I can give it a little recommendation still. Then Hannibal 2001, like I already mentioned, it's a bit unfocused. It's not paced particularly well, and although I did enjoy the dual play of bad characters here, it just suffers so much from the execution of the third act. Otherwise, I kind of enjoyed, even though there are some bad decisions. But I just can't make myself to recommend Hannibal with its third act. A sudden free pass for the bad character of the series, because sort of coming out of nowhere, which is my main gripe with the ending.
Yeah, the ending for me also is like the final nail on the coffin when it comes to Hannibal. I just can't stomach the film ending.
Yeah, standing there on the beach and don't shoot me, I'm the special agent who just let the mass murderer go. Okay. Meditating on that a bit.
I love you so much that I will chop off my own hand not to hurt you.
Yep.
Jesus Christ.
Whew. Hannibal Rising. No. Like, it's a diamond doesn't like. Hannibal Rising is one of those films that comes off the assembly line after a while when you have had a little success with your series and you just can't think of anything more. Let's do this prequel-y thingy and let's not truly put our heart and mind into it. Let's just put it there for the gore, the flesh aspect, not so much for the story aspect, which is what you should kind of do with the prequel. But I guess they fucked it up, so that's it. No recommendation for Hannibal Rising.
It's a film that was written and produced solely to put something out there.
Yeah. I don't know what was rising in Hannibal Rising, but it wasn't the usual contenders. Put the films still in order of preference, will you please?
From my end, well, it is going to be that's the same as my recommendation preference, pretty much. Silence of the Lambs, obviously number 1. Manhunter, number 2. Red Dragon takes the 4th place, solely because it's okay, but it's nothing special. I can't say it's a must see, like something like 7. The last 2 places, it's actually hard to say. I guess number 4 is Hannibal and number 5 is Hannibal Rising.
Okay, this is not completely easy for me. Obviously, Silence of the Lambs comes first, and then I would park my Manhunter here as a second and third. Though it's like, again, the same movie all over again, I'll put Red Dragon here. There were quite a few moments that I liked about Hannibal, but because it fucks it up its consistency, then I will just leave Hannibal as the 4th one. Finally ending this list with Hannibal not rising so much.
Yeah, more like Hannibal sleeping.
Yeah.
Which is something that you are gonna do for the first hour.
Wow. I'm wondering if our listeners have any better lists to provide. They can try to offer those on our Facebook page, which is still operating after all these years. And after all the tumultuous events in social media, we still have Facebook.
So that's a place where you can go and tell us all about why Hannibal Rising is the best one of all of these films.
Can't wait to hear that.
Uh-huh.
I think that's gonna be a bunch of millennials. Sorry. Not like myself.
I actually honestly do wait to hear an honest Hannibal Rising is the best one of all of these films argument / defense to be made.
Yeah, because it had more gore.
Well, I do hope that it's more nuanced than that.
Well, it had gore with Japanese samurai swords.
Which nicely and cleverly explains that one scene in Silence of the Lambs when Hannibal uses the cop's pattern to batter him to death. It's obviously alluded in Hannibal Rising when Hannibal learns katana shit, which he then never uses again.
Man of many talents. That's how he became a smart and educated man, by chopping off the heads of Nazis with samurai swords. Do we have any idea what we're gonna discuss next after this marathon run?
I don't know. Do we still wanna go with easy picks?
You wanna
easy topics?
You still wanna try the Wheel of Fortune with your suggestions?
I want to point that this was meant to be an easy pickings.
Well, it's never easy when you watch 5 movies, and it's about a psychological thriller / horror, which Henrik usually knows a thing or two about.
I don't know if everything else fails. Let's just give the wheel another spin.
I'm down to that. Hey, wanna do it right now?
Well, certainly, yeah. Why not?
Let's do it. Oh, I still have it in my browser memory. Just need to remove the Hannibal somehow here.
Well, if it lands on Hannibal, we just skip it. It's a respin after that.
Yeah, or we do the episode again. Let's see. Okay, we would have Judge Dredd, Pirates of the Caribbean, which I am actually looking forward to a bit.
And there, in Pirates of the Caribbean, it's just the original trilogy. We are not watching movies 4 and 5.
Oh yeah.
And 6 and 7 and 8 and 9.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We are only watching the Gore Verbinski shit.
and LA slash Dahlia.
LA Confidential.
LA Confidential slash
Yeah, it was a
Dahlia.
hotshot police thriller film.
And then we have
Eye in the Sky and Good Kill. 2 films about drone warfare.
And then we have Vernon.
Which is Behind the Mask / some other slasher horror film.
Okay.
Which we haven't yet decided. Could be Scream or something else like Friday the 13th sequel, depending on do we want to contrast a meta slasher versus another meta slasher or meta slasher versus just a typical slasher.
Okay. Now here goes. Judge Dredd versus Caribbean versus LA Conf, Dahlia versus Eye in the Sky, Good Kill versus Vernon. Spinning in 3, 2, 1, go.
And now it's just gonna land on Hannibal like 15 times in a row.
Looks like it. Oh my gosh.
We truly are cursed.
It almost dropped on Vernon, but it just barely got into Judge Dredd territory.
Okay. Well, it's just 2 movies.
Okay. I'm down.
And a hell of a lot of comic books. So, for fuck's sake.
Well, I don't know if I've had comic books since Akira days in this podcast, so let's go.
Yeah, why not? Although with Judge Dredd comics, there's so many, like, it's been continuous comic franchise ever since, was it the 80s when the first one came out? First ever Judge Dredd adventure was printed, and then there's like 1500 spin-offs on top of that. So it most definitely is like, just pick what you read. Like, any kind of official reading list is out of the question. Just way too much material.
Alright. Into the unknown. I haven't seen these movies, let alone read any of the comics, so the things you learn.
Mm-hmm. The 1995 has Sylvester Stallone and quite enormous cockpiece.
I would read about an actual sailor, a man called Christopher Columbus, if you've ever heard about the guy. I have like a over 1,000 pages long book here. But I guess I'm gonna read Judge Dredd comics then. Thanks.
It's a way better use of your time.
We'll find out. See you next time.
Until then.
Jesus.
Mä haluan puolustautua sillä, että tämä ihan oikeasti oli tarkoitettu helpoksi ja lyhyeksi. Me sanotaan jotain näistä leffoista ja iskemme jakson purkkiin hommaksi.
Joo, kyllä. Mä ajattelin, että mä en ota mitään painetta tästä pituudesta, että mä annan sun vaan vetää ja annan itteni höpöttää tässä ja katsotaan kauan siinä menee, että me ollaan saatu kaikki systeemistä ulos, niin sitten olemme molemmat tyytyväisiä. Näin siinä kävi.